Good evening and welcome to tonight's Monday, December 8th, 2025 City Council meeting. I'll first wait a motion to leave the non-public session and to seal the minutes of that session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And now, Kelly, will you please take the roll?
Yes. Mayor McCackron,
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Tabor,
Here.
Councilor Cook,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Blaylock,
Present.
Councilor Bagley,
Here.
Councilor Moreau,
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
Will you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First, we have the acceptance of minutes for October 6th, 2025 and October 20th, 2025.
Your Honor, I would move to accept the minutes of October 6th and October 20.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And now we are on to public comment. If you are here for the continued public hearing, you have that opportunity to speak on the CIP. I see a couple of folks have put that on there, but if you'd like to speak now, please do so. We will start with Roy Helsel on taxes and questions.
Good evening, Roy Helsel, Middle Road, Portsmouth. You talk about residents coming downtown more, but you never seem to be concerned with our taxes. They are always going up. At the same time, you seem to always give the developers a break and discount when they do a development. And why are commercial properties taxes at a lower rate per dollar than our homeowners are? Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Next is Jim Lee on wreaths across Portsmouth.
Jim Lee, 520 Sagamore Avenue. Good evening, Mayor McEachron and members of the City Council. As Chair of the Veterans Committee at the Portsmouth Elks Lodge, I'm honored to share an important tradition happening this Saturday, December the 13th at 10 a.m. Together with the Wreaths Across America, we'll be placing wreaths on the graves of our Portsmouth veterans, a heartfelt act to remember our fallen, honor those who have served, and teach the next generation the value of freedom. This is more than a ceremony. Each wreath placed is a tribute, a quiet, powerful way to say you're not forgotten. It's also an opportunity to pass on the legacy of service and sacrifice to our children, helping them to understand that the freedoms that we enjoy were secured by those who came before us. We warmly invite the mayor and the city council to join us, but also all Portsmouth residents, especially families with children and grandchildren. This tradition is a chance to come together as a community to honor, to remember, and to teach. Thank you for volunteering in years past, and thank you for helping us carry this mission forward. Let us remember them, honor their service, and teach our children why we must never forget. We'll gather at the Elks Club at 500 Jones Avenue in Portsmouth this Saturday at 10 a.m. for a brief ceremony, then distribute our wreaths to the various Portsmouth cemeteries. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for the invitation and reminder. Next, Bill Lyons on the CIP. Certainly. Esther Kennedy on Now Public. Now Public? Now Public.
Good evening, Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. In the spirit of Jim Spillane, I ask you, please, please give a title to your non-public meetings. It has not been happening. It's in the RSAs to happen, and we've asked a couple times, and to no avail. I'm not sure why we can't follow that simple law, but just just has to be one statement. I know in our non-public meetings where I work, it's one sentence. but it just gives an overview quickly of what you're meeting on. You've had a lot of non-publics, as we saw on a campaign sign, and I just ask that you be more open about what your non-publics are on your major topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Next, we have Francis Cormier on learning from history.
Francis Cormier, Melbourne Street, Portsmouth. We were always told in school to study history so we didn't keep making the same mistakes. And so when I was at Portsmouth High School, there were only 2 years required to study science, but they required 3 years to study history. And we always asked why. Why is history more important than science? And it was so we didn't keep making the same stupid mistakes over and over again. The Portsmouth Herald today, on the front page, the headline reads, "Bill seeks Pease Air Base housing at Great Bay Community College for students and military." And one of the quotes from the article on page 2, "In Portsmouth, anything that will allow more people to actually live in the community where they go to school or where they work is a good idea." The problem, what I don't understand is when they closed Pease Air Base, there were, I don't know how many hundred houses there that the pilots lived in and their families. In fact, a couple friends of mine, they lived on Pease in those houses. They were built in 1956, I think, or 54. They were built in the 1950s anyway. They were small, yeah, I know, by today's standards, and but they were perfectly livable. When they closed Pease, pilots and their family were living in them houses. Once they closed Pease, they were bulldozed all those houses. And I don't know how many there were, whether there were 100 or 200, I never counted them. But it seems to me kind of wasteful and actually dumb to do that. And now they're looking for, housing for poor people, low-income housing. Well, those houses were perfectly livable. In fact, right down the street from where I live was a retired Air Force pilot. He was retired, and he thought it was rather foolish. I remember him saying that. He's dead now, but he said that was rather foolish to destroy all those houses on Pease that were perfectly livable. And now we're looking for housing for students at Great Bay Community College, and we're looking for housing for the military, according to today's Portsmouth Herald. So I'm on a different frequency. I just can't understand government and why they do things that are so wasteful, like destroying all those houses on Pease.
Thank you, Francis. Next, we have Emma Stratton on the CIP to speak now or to speak at the CIP. Speak at CIP, thank you. Great. With that, seeing no hands on Zoom, nobody else rising to speak on public comment, we will move to the CIP. Next up is the public hearing and vote on ordinances and resolutions, continued public hearing, capital improvement plan, CIP adoption of the CIP. We've had the presentation, so we will open up the public hearing remains open, but please come and speak to, for, against any item in the CIP as it stands, or items not included in the CIP.
Good evening. Petri Huda, Portsmouth. So I'm here tonight to request that you postpone this final vote for the CIP. I'm here tonight to bring forward a critical issue that I believe requires your immediate attention before you take a final vote. Since The CIP was not included in the packet. Is it possible for the city manager to bring that up on the screen?
I don't believe
No?
it's possible for public hearing to bring it up on the screen,
Okay.
but
I'll just go on, and I would ask that that the council pull this report up and follow along. Tonight, you are being asked to approve a long-term, multi-year financial plan for the city, but the numbers you were given contain a major $11,075,000 error. An error large enough to materially change what you believe you are voting on. This is not a small discrepancy or a rounding issue. This is a fundamental multi-million-dollar mistake in the combined funding section for FY28 and FY29. I would ask that you go to page 30 and 31 from the November 12th presentation. And the section is 6 combined funding projects. When you look at the project lines and add them up, the totals printed on the bottom do not match the numbers above. Let me give you the simple example. Everybody there? The following projects are listed under FY28. Page 172, citywide storm drainage, $1 million. Page 178, Coakley neighborhood reconstruction, $4 million. Page 180, Cabot Austin Street sewer, $3 million. Lafayette Park, $75,000. The total of these items is $8,075,000. Yet the report you were given lists FY28 total only as $1 million. That's a $7 million understatement in that year. On to FY29. P172, citywide storm drainage, $1 million. P176, the Creek neighborhood reconstruction, $3 million. P182, Lafayette Park, Monroe drainage, $1 million. P184, Maplewood Ave reconstruct, Route 1 bypass to railroad tracks, $3 million. The listed projects total $8 million, but the report only shows $4 million. Together, these two misstatements alone create a total error of $11,075,000 in the combined funding totals, which directly impacts your debt schedule, bonding decisions, and overall financial planning. Counselors, you cannot make a sound fiscal decision when the math is wrong by 8 figures. What I am asking for tonight is reasonable and responsible. Please table or postpone the final vote until corrected numbers can be provided to you. You owe it to yourself, to city staff, and most importantly, to the taxpayers who will be responsible for this spending. Approving a multi-year capital plan with an $11 million error in the totals would not be physically responsible. Waiting for the corrected figures would be the only path that protects the integrity of your vote and the credibility of the process. I respectfully ask you to table or delay final approval until you receive an accurate report. Before voting on a plan of this size, the council and the public deserve accurate numbers. I strongly urge you to postpone or table this. I could go on with the next one, but I think this is pretty powerful, and I really hope you heed this. If you looked at it, obviously they don't add up. And the numbers that I'm looking at for the total, you had, the report gives you a grand total of $280,109,451. The actual grand total is $291,726,368. For FY27, that would give you a $33,610,917 increase. And that's what I'm looking at to see how much this would increase. So I have more that I could ask you to look at, but I will wait till the second part of this. I think this is something you should definitely consider for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any other speakers on the capital improvement plan?
Good evening. Bill Lyons, Mendham Avenue, Portsmouth. I'm here representing the Sustainability Committee. On November 17th, the Council asked our committee to provide recommendations on CIP Project B12629, which is on page 89 of the meeting packet for this evening. I have a few comments to complement Councillor Denton's summary, which I think comes later. We recommend the Council consider opportunities to advance city priorities by increasing public transit usage. For a dense, walkable community of neighborhoods and services, in Portsmouth, public transit is a meager 1% of trips. We can do better. We recommend retitling the project to Study of Opportunities to Expand Use of Public Transit, to take a broad ecosystem approach to public transit, emphasizing connections to economy, environment, and social equity. The project would explore a range of options and innovations that could include, for example, improving the frequency and direct connections of current coast routes, possibly with a pilot, for example, that could run along a potential transit corridor such as Lafayette Road, Route 1 downtown, and then directly onto the West End, Hospital, Portsmouth Housing, Properties, and CNJ. Or a shuttle directly connecting major origins and destinations, downtown and perhaps satellite parking, and the broader regional network of Coast, UNH, Wildcat, and CNJ. Microtransit, which has flexible routes, schedules, and real-time dispatch, or a hybrid that might combine more than one type of change. The project would explore how to address at least six of the city's top priorities. 1, support the Climate Action Plan's zero emissions goal with attractive options to driving personal vehicles. The major reason transportation is the dominant source of greenhouse gas emissions in Portsmouth. It's 60% of the city's total. To meet the zero emissions goal of the plan, this project proposed CIP project addresses specific CAP actions to shift to low carbon public transit with walk and bike connections. 2, affordable housing is a top priority for Portsmouth. Transportation added to rent or mortgages can take 50% of household incomes. Public transit reduces mobility costs and the need to own, operate, and park cars. 3, Portsmouth employers are challenged to find workers, particularly in the hospitality industry and for low-wage jobs. Reduced mobility costs from affordable housing improves worker availability. Reduced mobility costs with affordable housing improves worker availability. 4, parking is a major concern. The parking study identifies the inevitability of a third garage and the need to consider public transit along with other options beyond building more parking. Shifts from cars to public transit reduces public demand for parking as well as traffic. 5th, bringing residents downtown. Residents who are unable or prefer not to drive. This would complement the parking discounts that are currently available while supporting a more vibrant city center. 6, support car-free tourism. Visitors could arrive at CNJ from Logan or South Station and transfer conveniently to a bus downtown. Best practice peers promote green tourism as part of the city's brand. For example, Savannah's free shuttle loop for visitors and residents in the historic core, managed and funded by the city as well as the transit agency and the hospitality industry in a collaboration. We recommend beginning the project as soon as possible with a small collaborative task force to explore opportunities and partnerships, identify available federal, state, as well as local and innovative funding sources. 3, build support and interest in the community. And 4, shape a potential RFP to expand analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Good Good evening. I'm Emma Stratton, 10 Middle Street, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Arts and Culture Commission to express our strong support for adopting the CIB as presented, as it includes $65,000 to fund a study with ArtSpace regarding artist live workspace here in Portsmouth. Our commission has followed the CIP process closely at every step, and we've discussed it with the council here on multiple occasions. Over the past 2 years, we've worked diligently to draft a comprehensive study for the need for artist housing in our city. And through that process, ArtSpace has emerged as a leading candidate to assist us given their national expertise in this specialized area. We are eager to collaborate with them and to welcome their guidance on all aspects of planning and implementation. It's worth noting that ArtSpace was identified as a potential partner by the arts and culture community nearly a decade ago. At that time, however, a lack of support prevented the project from moving forward. And in the intervening years, our housing crisis has only intensified, and within our commission, we have personally known dozens of artists who are priced out of Portsmouth. This $65,000 investment is not simply about a study, it's about taking a critical step toward understanding and developing viable live-work space for artists as part of a broader solution to affordable housing challenges in this city. We respectfully ask that you reserve this funding so we can explore this opportunity thoroughly and responsibly and ensure that Portsmouth remains a vibrant, creative, and inclusive community for the artists who contribute so much to its culture and economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Good evening, councilors, Mr. Mayor, City Manager. I'm here to speak in regards to the CIP funds as they relate to New Franklin and the investment in that school. I first got a taste.
School board member Maddow, you mind just saying your name?
Yeah, sorry. My name's Byron Maddow. I live at 17 Fields Road. So I first got a taste of the needs at New Franklin during the redistricting process. And I recall anecdotally folks telling me New Franklin is bursting at the seams. I was confused about that because at the time, by the numbers at first glance, I didn't see the immediate need. The class sizes seemed to be in line with the other schools. The enrollment had been steady for 5-10 years. However, when we finally got a chance to tour the school in that process, it became clear what bursting at the seams meant. There are many spaces where students are receiving services, frankly, in spaces which, frankly, even calling them a space is a stretch. One such location that stands out to me is like a 4x6 concrete nook where a ladder hangs. The museum-like gym, the leaky roof, the library, which is also a causeway. And, you know, in that redistricting process, there were many conversations had. And one, again, that stands out was talking about, should we spend that time talking about investing in the space that was already there? Can we make it nicer? I remember we were trying to push this conversation to this point. We were saying, well, we need to talk about investing in New Franklin during CIP. And, you know, we could make this supply closet really nice. We can spend a lot of money on this supply closet. It would still just be a supply closet where we're teaching kids. And I'll just read a piece from the report. New Franklin's physical capacity is more limited than Dondero and Little Harbor, leading to overcrowded and improvised spaces. And they often fail to meet modern standards, particularly for intervention, special education, and flexible learning environments. While there are many private or semi-private spaces for interventions at Dondero and Little Harbor, comparable spaces at New Franklin are consistently utilized by multiple students where need for utilization of hallways or vestibules or even in exterior doors. The issues that place New Franklin at a disadvantage compared to the other schools, underscoring the need for long-term investment. And the constrained spaces don't even speak to the safety issues of the entranceway or for the, you know, quote, offices where the senior staff meet to coordinate the critical and sacred task of educating our kids. And it sounds like many of the folks on the council had an opportunity to tour the schools recently. And I hope that if folks didn't get a chance to, that they reach out to the principal at New Franklin. I'm sure she would be more than welcoming to have you look at the school. And I hope that that tour had an impact to sway you in such a way to ensuring the much needed funding to bring that building up to a level which not only matches the other elementary schools, but also, and maybe more importantly, brings it to a state which does not have one shake their head as they consider the conditions. I think just going to the gym at Little Harbor and then going to the gym at New Franklin and then just sitting with that for a little while, I think is a pretty powerful thing to do. Now, obviously, there's no shortage in things that on their own show a need for investment. I think if you're in the business of writing CIPs, business is good. I just think this is a really important, critical piece. And I want to tie it to a couple other discussions we've had. In the last budget process, there was a lot of focus on out-of-district placements. And it's a complicated problem. I think investing in personnel is one thing, but if we're going to do big things to try and create programs to reduce those out-of-district spends, those were going to require space. And so the space at New Franklin, maybe it's classroom space, maybe it's intervention space. Overall, it increases the capacity we have in those buildings and plays into that larger conversation. The other thing I want to speak to is I had done a renovation on my house in 2018, and I remember the builder always saying, well, Byron, it'll never be this price again, whenever we were talking about something we were going to do or not do. And, you know, it's 2025 now, and certainly that's true. So as we go into a process like this, and we're going to break walls and break ground potentially at New Franklin, I think we should be clear that we want to get the most out of the dollars we spend and not be short-sighted in those investments. So that's what I have to say, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Byron.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, City Manager, Councilors. My name is Tammy Truax. I am the Library Media Specialist at New Franklin School, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of my whole department of Unified Arts teachers at New Franklin School in support of full funding for renovations. So I'm going to read a statement from my colleagues one at a time. This is from the Italian teacher. In my experience as an educator in Portsmouth, I have had the opportunity to teach in all 3 elementary schools. Currently, I teach at Dondero 3 days a week and New Franklin 2 days a week. At Dondero, I have a classroom space with my 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students that they come to. At New Franklin School, I have never had a space from which to teach, so I go into classrooms. This proves challenging for students and teachers. Leaving their room for their special is often an important part of breaking up students' day in their classroom. Teachers also use UA time as their prep block, so they are either forced to leave their classroom when I come in or stay to get work done among the distractions of my class. In some years, there has been a spare room available that was shared between special education, literacy, and math tutors and myself, though that room was only available as an office space. There have also been years where the only space available for my materials was the staff lounge. The NFS staff is always obliging, generous, and everyone knows they are in the same boat in terms of space and how we can utilize it. However, students frequently complain that not having a dedicated classroom for our time together like at Dondero is unfair. It puts strain on my ability to immerse them in a dedicated environment for my subject. Additionally, I have felt nervous about the fact that there isn't a dedicated vestibule for those entering the school, a notable difference between NFS and the other 2 schools. Signed, Marissa Bugnano. This is from our PE teacher. The gym space cannot be made bigger, but it can be made safer. When you step into the gym, it feels like you are stepping back in time. The floor is tile on top of a cement slab. It is very hard when the kids fall down and hit their knees and elbows. The tiles themselves are old, uneven, and some are falling apart. It does not make for a smooth, safe playing surface. The walls are wood paneling that is splintering, rough, loose, and falling apart. Over the years, kids have received splinters and cuts from rubbing against the walls. Due to lack of storage, the playing court is surrounded by chairs, mats, and other equipment that can be dangerous if run into. The stage does not look good, as it could, due to a lack of storage. There is PE equipment, extra classroom furniture, and music equipment, all on the stage. In general, we may not be able to make the gym bigger, but we can make it better and safer. Signed, Peter Lindrum. This is from our music teacher. My name is Karen Marceau. I am the music teacher at New Franklin School, where I have been lucky enough to work since 2012. One part of my job that I am most passionate about is preparing kids for and performing in concerts. These concerts are incredibly important events for the students and the families that look forward to them. The condition of the gym and stage at NFS, where most of our concerts happen, absolutely does not reflect the high-quality performance my students put on. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Due to lack of storage at our school, the stage has become a glorified storage unit. The curtains on the stage are disintegrating and ripped due to large and heavy items being stored and moved around back there. Each year, I have to find creative ways to hide all of these non-performance items by using tables, bulletin board paper, and blankets. I am limited with what I can do on the stage with kids because the lack of space and the unsafe nature of having so many things stacked up behind the curtains and around the stage. We are in desperate need of a facelift so that our gym and stage can be a place where students feel proud to perform. The NFS gym is the heart of our school. We use it for more than just performance. We meet there for monthly assemblies, STEM nights, art shows, PTO dance parties, movie nights, talent shows, and much more. It has been neglected for long enough. Our students deserve better. New Franklin is an incredibly special place to work, and I am grateful to be part of this community. Thank you for your time and consideration. Signed, Karen Marceau. And this is my statement. So, I'm the library media specialist at New Franklin School. Well, I've only held this position for 6-7 years.
Oh, is that not intentional? I thought you were doing that for the kids.
It's a true statement, really. My affiliation with New Franklin School goes back 20 years. First as a parent, then a volunteer and PTO member, then a sub, 2 different stints as the after-school program coordinator, then when my youngest left for college, as a para-educator. I have worked in every space in the building, literally. As a para-educator, I remember proctoring mandatory state tests to children who by law need special accommodations on the loading dock and in the supply closet and in the outdoor vestibule mentioned earlier. And I sat in our hallways for countless hours with our most distractible children, trying my best to help them focus and ignore the constant distractions that occur in our busy hallways. That particular skill has been absolutely essential since the day I began serving as a librarian. While you've been informed that our library is too small, that is actually the problem that concerns me the least, because it does the least harm. The distractions are a problem that is hard for anyone who doesn't spend time in the room to fully appreciate. And I cannot imagine any classroom teacher would ever accept. While it is extremely challenging for me to teach under such circumstances, the real question is, can my students learn under such circumstances? The answer for some, especially our sensory sensitive children, is no. It is a scenario where we are literally setting them up for failure. As you know, there are 2 two-way hallways in the library that intersect at one doorway. Those 2 hallways have constant, not occasional, traffic. Last week was one of my least favorite weeks of the year. That is when kids start wearing snow gear. the traffic becomes something that no one is capable of ignoring. Entire classes passing through with a swishing of snow pants, the clomping of snow boots, and even the rhythmic thumping of sleds being pulled through the room as I try to teach or read to children. We frequently have individual dysregulated children run through, making different kinds of sounds that can sometimes be frightening to the students I'm teaching. You also know an entry door to the staff room is in the library, which is used dozens of times a day. None of those doors close silently. And we listen to that staff room toilet flush all day long. And as staff heats up their meals, I can't tell you how often I have to field the question, "What's that smell?" And then the guessing ensues. One afternoon each week, we listen to fifth graders practice their band instruments in the staff room because they have nowhere else to go. We also have more strangers in the library than any classroom, which may not be alarming for the children, but it can be for me. There are very real security issues to our space having 4 doors that an intruder can enter. Ask any of your police force. That is unsafe is not my opinion. It is a fact. Sometimes the strangers are contractors who need to go in and out of the electrical room that can only be accessed at the back of the library. And did you know that the dark and dirty electrical room also serves as the lactation room for our staff? A grossly unsanitary situation that is not just demoralizing, but illegal. That one is my opinion and a fact. It infuriates me when I see a teacher heading back there for that purpose, because it is just so wrong. Another pet peeve of mine is that for reasons I will never understand, we have a recess bell that rings inside the library. It is horribly loud, even though I have put a pillow on it. Our kindergarten children get visibly scared when it rings. Everyone, even those without neurodivergencies, finds it disturbing, because it is. While I said square footage for students and for housing our collection is the least of my concerns, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the lack of librarian workspace. I've adjusted to not having a desk, but it is a real problem that I don't have an office. This means that I never get the daily uninterrupted prep time that I am contractually entitled to and that I need. I do my planning at home every Saturday morning because in our library there is no uninterrupted time. Even before and after school, children and adults are in and out. It also means that it is impossible to have a confidential conversation or meeting in the library. And without a standard book processing workspace, we have to gather, carry, spread out the books and supplies needed to process new books, and then collect them and put them away every time we work on that task, because we can't leave them out in a workroom with that afforded space that's just for that task. It makes that task so much more time-consuming than it should be. Lastly, because of the age of the building, the library was not wired to meet the technological needs of a modern school library, or any tech needs at all. And while the district has done their very best to MacGyver our room, it is insufficient. Wi-Fi can be spotty. There are not enough outlets, requiring the use of power strips and other make-do approaches. That's a good place for me to stop. We have done our best. We have done our part making do. Now we need you to do your part in ensuring an equal education to every child in this town. None of the things I've just mentioned exist in any other school library in Portsmouth, and they shouldn't exist at New Franklin. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Truex.
Welcome.
Good evening, Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. Tammy said it so well, I don't think anyone else can say it better. The only thing I was going to suggest under New Franklin is that you pull it out and make it a separate category on the CIP, so you can really focus on that category, because it's mixed in to the other things with the school. So I would encourage you to do that. I would also ask that one of the things that I would really like us to see is to look at our special needs population and what kind of infrastructure needs to be put in place to support moving students home. As you know, I ran on that, and I will continue to focus on that. It's abysmal that we have that problem. So I didn't see anything in there about infrastructure for that. And if we're going to bring kids back home, then we need that infrastructure. The other thing I'd like to point out and build upon what Fran said in history. We're celebrating our 250th, and it was sad to see that we took away the money for the cemeteries. I don't know why. There was always a constant $40,000 there to keep upkeep, and this upcoming year, it is gone. That's sad, folks. We need to keep our infrastructure, and that includes the history of our community. I saw the money in there for the archives that need to be preserved. I would encourage you to maybe even add a little more to that, because we need to preserve our history. We need to understand our history. This is a big time for us. We're celebrating our 250th. We're one of the 13 colonies. And so I would encourage you to look at those points as you review the CIP, and maybe think about how we can work harder at our preservation so not more gets destroyed in floods, which recently happened. I'm going to move to another educational focus. Sad to see that you took out the pump track. We had the skateboard park in there. We fulfilled that, but there's another piece of land there, folks, as part of the old stump dump, we like to call it. And that piece of land, we were committing to have a pump track or some other kind of maybe athletic field for those middle schoolers to high schoolers. You have a multitude of playgrounds in this CIP, and you have a lot of money for next year for playgrounds, which are great and are appropriate. But you have nothing, because you've taken this away, for our middle school children and our high school children. And you know as well as I do that that skateboard park is used every day, all the time. And you've taken out the potential for a pump track. And I don't know what kind of deal you have with Cerverini, but you must have something. We need to clean that up, and we need to do right by our middle schoolers and our high schoolers. They requested that, and I encourage you to give it to them. The other point I'd like to look at is I don't see anything in there or even a study about Jones Ave and Coakley. As we know, Coakley is a Superfund site that we're responsible for. Jones Ave has the same dumpage, same kind of covering that Coakley has. And I would encourage you, I was pleased to see the studies for the vernal pools. Thank you for that. But I would encourage you to look at studies for these Superfund or potential Superfund sites. And what are they doing to our waterways? What is really happening there? We don't know the answer, but we do know there's a lot of stuff going on in Jones Ave that should be looked at and the city's responsible for. I have to ask, I saw the fire truck in there that was passed in October, early October, I believe it was October 8th, and for $2.5 million. And I really want to know what the RFP was. That was passed so quickly, folks, that you didn't see an RFP. So I'm asking formally, under right to know, for an RFP on the fire truck and making sure it went out to bid because some of the things that I question is, are things really going through the process? I would like to finish with a fireboat, the proverbial fireboat. We bought a fireboat not that long ago, and it's supposed to last 20 years. And yet, now I see in there we have another $900,000 fireboat. That doesn't include all the training that's going to go along with that fireboat. So I have to ask, first of all, we sold a fireboat to Newcastle. Then we bought a couple fireboats. And yet now we're going for a $900,000 fireboat. You have other infrastructure that you need to handle. I'm not quite sure what that fireboat is going to do different than what they have. As someone who sits on the waterfront and sees a lot, I also know there's other entities that meet emergencies. So I just have to ask, and I would hope you would all ask, why we're getting a new fireboat within a couple years of the one we just bought when it was supposed to have a 20-year life expectancy. So I found you some money. I asked you for some help, but I really want you to do what's right and take a moment. And I want to support Peter Huda. Peter Huda called me and said, "You won't believe what I found." I said, "Yes, I would." And then I said, "You better go back to the drawing board because I found more." That's $8 million, folks. We need to keep looking, we need to keep adjusting, and we need to make sure we're accurate to the citizens of Portsmouth. And I hope you hold off on making a decision like she requested. And I hope that you do what's right and give us the right figures and give us an opportunity to speak on those figures. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Noveline Clayburgh. I live at 405 FW Hartford Drive. Thanks once again for the opportunity to speak. In 2006, I was a member of the Joint Building Committee for the extensive renovation and addition to Portsmouth High School. In 2013, I was a member of that same committee when we renovated and added onto Portsmouth Middle School. In between there, we made extensive renovations to Little Harbor and Dondero schools. As I mentioned the last time, my son had speech therapy in the mimeograph room at Dondero because there was no other space. That renovation happened at Dondero, so that doesn't happen anymore. Also, many of you will remember the wonderful change we made with our alternative high school, the Lister Academy, when we moved it from the Sherburne School to its current location at the community campus. It is truly a state-of-the-art facility. I know many of you recently had a tour of New Franklin, and I'm sure you will agree that much needs to be done. Please support the CIP plan to make the last building and our school fleet a modern, up-to-date facility that will make us all proud of our schools. On another note, I am the school board representative to the Sustainability Committee, and I would like to support the presentation that Bill Lyons made a few minutes ago. And I also want to thank Councilor Denton for all his hard work on bringing that committee to our city. Everyone, have a happy holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Good evening, members of the council, Mr. Mayor. My name is David Calkins. I live at 175 Woodlawn Circle. I'm here tonight with my family, and this is Josie. Wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but my daughters insisted on coming to be a part of the process. And something just occurred to me that while they're here not because they understand the CIP or the immense responsibility that you have carrying a budget for this city, quite frankly, I can't comprehend all of the numbers and the depths of the budget. They're here tonight because they have immense pride in the school that they go to, which is New Franklin. And while they may not understand what's deficient or what may be inequitable, they're here because they love their school, they love their teachers. Their teachers do amazing work with the space that they're given, and we're just incredibly grateful that the city sees New Franklin as a diamond in the rough that really has continued to provide for these young kids and now is getting some recognition that it deserves and hopefully the funds. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josie, my 6-year-old daughter here. Okay, remember, keep it quick.
My name is Josie, and I'm here to say that the gym's a little bit too close to the library, because I feel like that if the gym's close to the library, the gym's too loud for like the libraries to like listen and like raise their hand and talk.
Good job. And say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Great
Thank
job.
you very much.
Hello, I'm Ava, and I live at 777 Middle Road, and I also think that the library is too close to the gym, because when kids are trying to learn, there's always something noisy going on, and the kids in the gym are having fun, but they're also making it noisy for the kids in the library who are trying to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava. Any other speakers under public comment? Teacher Huda? If all other speakers have gone through, yes.
So there's a few other things that I'd like to bring to your attention. The summary language in your report that I reviewed, according to your own CIP, pages 13 and 14, the document says the CIP is supposed to maintain existing infrastructure, identify and coordinate capital needs, and prevent piecemeal, duplicated, or scattered projects. So that's what I'd like to talk to you about. In short, it is a coordinated multi-year plan that avoids unnecessary and duplicating spending. So the first thing I'd like to talk to you about is the municipal building and facility requests that appear to be overlapping. And what I'm talking about is in BI, the buildings and infrastructure, and it's related to the city. So you have a project called Municipal Complex Upgrade, $38,300,000. Municipal Building Audit Implementations, $1 million. City HVAC improvements, this is out a little bit, but my thought would be logically it would be included if you upgrade the complex. And then citywide capital improvements of $550,000. These 4 line items total $40,000,008. And appear to be overlapping scopes, building improvements, upgrades, audits, HVAC, and citywide improvements. Yet they are presented as separate projects. This structure directly conflicts with the CIP mandate to avoid piecemeal improvements. Next, I'd like to talk to you about the school capital projects. And I would like to add, on top of everybody else who spoke about the schools, 2 other items. So on page 73, you have school facilities and improvements, $3 million. Elementary upgrade, which is New Franklin. The total on that is $10 million. Next, you have elementary school playground upgrades, which includes New Franklin. I would like to see this put together. You have next school pavement and roofing that was previously in another line item. The other thing that you have in here that the kids were just complaining about, and this would definitely help, is number 109. It's the sound barriers in that area of I-95. So I would ask you, completely finish this project, upgrade the school, upgrade the playground, and also put the barriers in so they don't have to deal with all that noise. Next thing, on your studies, I went in and summarized the amount of studies that you were doing. We have over $1 million worth of studies. The issue here for me, many of these appear to be redundant, premature, or unrelated to infrastructure. They also contradict the city's CIP claim that projects should fit the city's financial capability, but they also include federal funds that we don't know if we're going to get. The lay explanation here is taxpayers are funding over $1 million worth of studies, many exploratory, not essential, and not tied into immediate needs. I asked you to look at this. Overall, the CIP's stated purpose is to coordinate, consolidate, and prioritize spending, but the actual project list contains fragmentation, duplication, and over $40 million in building projects that appear uncoordinated. The structure of the request appears inconsistent with the CIP's own rules and may be driving unnecessary spending and tax pressure. Lastly, I would like to talk to you about the difference between a capital expenditure and a maintenance expenditure. And this is in, I want to highlight the differences here because this affects transparency, budgeting integrity, and taxpayer trust. The capital improvement plan is supposed to be used for major capital investments, things like land building, expanding facilities, major renovations like the schools, and major equipment purchases over $50,000. The CIP is not supposed to include routine repairs and ongoing maintenance. Those belong in the general fund. We already have cost centers and staff with maintenance dollars budgeted for that work. I could go through and list all of these, but there is quite a few, and I'll just give you an example. A capital expenditure needs to add and extend the life of a building or an asset. Maintenance simply keeps things functioning as they are. Capital gets depreciated over time. Maintenance is an operating cost. But when we look at the CIP, we see a significant number of items that appear to be ordinary maintenance labeled as capital projects. These are all in the general fund, which means you're charging us twice. These include annual needs of the indoor pool, outdoor rec facilities, city playgrounds, Pierce Island, community campus, parks and monuments, trees and greenery is now capital. Prescott Park facility upkeep, cemetery work, even recycling totes are in there, and retaining wall repairs. These are all maintenance. They are not increasing any value in the asset. All of these items already have dedicated cost centers in the operating budget, which you will be getting pretty soon. They have staff assigned. They have maintenance dollars allocated every year for this. By shifting this work into the CIP, the city is inflating capital spending, misclassifying routine expenses, and presenting a long list of capital projects that are not actually capital in nature. This creates three problems. First, it obscures the true cost of annual maintenance, which you have it in your operating budget and you have it in your capital now. Second, it drives CIP costs upward, making it look like we have more major projects than we do. And third, it can lead to borrowing for routine repairs, something that is financially unsound and unfair to the taxpayers. The CIP is meant to be a long-term planning tool for major investments, not a catch-all bucket for everyday repairs. If we want financial transparency and responsible management, then maintenance must stay in the operating budget where it belongs, and the CIP must follow its own definitions and rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other speakers? Any council questions?
Your Honor, if it's helpful, Nathan and I can take a stab at some of the things that were discussed. Nathan, as you're coming up, I'll share that we are confident in the FY27 amounts included in the CIP. The capital outlay number is correct. The element sheets are correct. The debt service schedule is correct. The financial summary is pages 26 through 31. And in that, the FY27 distribution, the blue columns are accurate. What we've got newer numbers is on the out years of 28 and 29 under the combined projects that I believe Nathan's going to speak to.
Good evening, folks. First, I want to appreciate Peter Huda's eagle eye. Thank you very much. On page 31 of your CIP, at the bottom of the financial summary, that summary has total combined funding projects summarized by general government, water, and sewer funds, and then a total project number. You'll note that in page 31 today, right now, the one that's in your, provided to you in November and continues to be the document you're working with, it lists a total project amount for FY28 at $1 million and FY29 at $4 million. In fact, as was pointed out during public hearing, the FY28 total should be $7,075,000, broken down $2,075,000 general government, $2,750,000 water fund, and $3,250,000 sewer fund, for a total of $8,075,000. And then in the FY29, what you see totaling $4 million should be $2.5 million for general government, $4 million for water, and this $1.5 million for sewer is correct, for a total of $8 million. The total correction there is $7,075,000 was the difference in 28, and $4 million in 29. The $11,075,000 that was referenced is correct. So certainly we are always open to anybody with an eagle eye like that to catch. The spreadsheet, if you look at that particular page and in the pages just above it in the financial summary, the individual lines are correct. They total correctly to the right. But when we added new columns there, new projects into that page, we clearly didn't carry the cell formulas correctly across the totals. And for that, I make apologies. I would leave it to the council to decide what you'd like to do. We certainly could make that amendment, although I would remind you that if tonight you make amendments, because you have motions and discussion and deliberations, those changes aren't reflected either. And so that's the nature of this dynamic document as you go through this process. But I would also remind you, this is just the plan. There is no funding authorization included in this, and any dollars that we would promote into the budget will come back to you as a part of that budget process. So take any questions if that's for me.
Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor. And Nathan, you just touched on that. As a counselor, fiscal year 27 is of critical importance because that's what we're actually anticipating to spend. Anything in the out year, which is fiscal years 28 through 32, those are just forecast tools to make sure that we don't exceed our bond limits. So, we're anticipating in 3 years we may have to spend this, in 4 years we may have to spend this. But what we're really doing tonight, and every time we adopt a CIP, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we're really just talking about authorizing or planning to authorize to bond for the next fiscal year. And the out years are kind of fungible from a finance standpoint where we can move things around. And every year we do end up moving things around. Some out years come in, some get pushed out. So from a critical standpoint, if there were errors in fiscal 27, that would be more, at least in my opinion, much more concerning than errors in out years.
And to that point, I would say we come back to you in the budget process with any elements of FY27. They get built into the debt service, the capital outlay, and the other components of the non-operating portion of your proposed budget, where you have an opportunity to consider and adjust any of those if you like. And with regard to bonding, there still is nothing that happens until after you have a public hearing and a discussion and a vote to authorize a bonding resolution. So there's no spending that can or would come about clearly as a result of this action alone. That should not in any way be forgiving of there being an error. We intend not to make errors, and we certainly appreciate anybody drawing them to our attention so that we can make sure that the best information is made available.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can we just make those adjustments before we adopt the final budget in June? Because it's my understanding we're looking at the CIP tonight for adoption, but we don't finalize the full budget until June. And so if we make those changes for the June adoption, this just gets wrapped into the June final vote.
And yes, and again, to be clear, the elements that we found the errors on, appreciate them being pointed out, are in out years FY '28 and '29, and would not affect FY '27 and would not be part of this next proposed budget.
Councilor Tabor?
And what I hear you saying is that the element sheets, the debt schedule, everything is correct except this roll-up report.
As far as the huddle that we just had for the better part of half an hour out in the lobby, absolutely. Everybody sitting around the computers and double checking, going back over those numbers.
Okay.
Yes, we believe that everything is correct to the extent that it would impact you looking at 27 and the debt schedule.
Right, so the actual capital items as shown in the element sheets are correct.
Yes, sir.
Nathan, while we have you, question on repair versus maintenance. There was a comment in public comment regarding, I think it was a retaining wall. It's one that stood out. How do we classify things as something being routinely repaired or replaced versus maintenance?
I think the definitions that you've heard tonight are decent ones. I would suggest to you that there are cases where we toe a line. We have, for instance, in the CIP as it exists today, a $25,000 recurring dollar amount to establish matching funds for the public art, which some might argue should be an operating expenditure budgeted somewhere. I think in this case, it may or may not sit comfortably under a department of the city, and so this seems to have been a decent vehicle for it. But I would suggest to you that things like putting paint on a wall or repairing a piece of carpeting, those would generally be operating costs for maintenance. Although when we paint an entire structure or we replace carpeting to the tune of $250,000 in a very large building, those things become capital maintenance, and we accept those as a part of the CIP.
Thank you. Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just because Nathan's up here, I have a question about the schools. Would this be a good time?
Would be. We might, if there are, I guess I would just ask if Nathan, you could sit down, if there are folks that have comments on the schools, given that there might be people watching at home, that we discuss that, I guess, quicker, so that they can go to bed, or they can tell, or if they're, they take a shower, whatever they're going to do. So if we just want to pull up the, I'm just thinking of my own kids, but if there's a conversation that we want to have on the schools, we might want to just bring that up just a little bit further, and then we'll go back to having conversations with Nathan. Is that all right?
Well, I was asking if I could ask him a question specifically to the schools.
Great, sure.
And that's the comment on the New Franklin School, $5 million. It was mentioned, that the other schools, Dondero and Little Harbor, are included in the element sheet, although New Franklin is called out in the project description. My understanding, which may or may not be correct, is the vast majority of that $5 million would go to New Franklin School, but we're leaving ourselves a little flexibility if we need to buy, say, 3 sets of air conditioners, and we're able to buy those for schools at the same time, or is that just an oversight?
Rather than an oversight, I think that if I'm speaking to the correct element sheet, it's elementary capital improvement, elementary school, and it has been there since. If you look at the number, it's probably BI 12 or 13 or 14. Like it's been. I'm looking for help because I'm not looking
at BI 08 SC-16 elementary school upgrades.
So 08. So that element sheet has been in existence since 2008 and has carried, if you will, the capital improvements to some to New Franklin when they did mechanicals at the very outset, and then Little Harbor and Dondero. Right now, in that element sheet that you're looking at, the 6 years of this plan, $5 million and $5 million and $500,000, I believe, are all New Franklin. All New Franklin is the intent right now.
Okay, that was
all
the clarity
related to that one
looking for.
project. Yeah.
Councilor Bullock.
Thank you. I don't mean Christopher. I want to thank the speakers, the Franklin students especially, It takes guts to come up here and speak and to stand up for your school and your classmates, and I really appreciate that. I was able to tour the elementary schools with several other counselors, and I also had the privilege of attending Dondero as a student when I was a young kid, and the mayor was attending New Franklin School. And growing up here in Portsmouth, when we were younger, 30 years ago, there was a clear discrepancy between Dondero, Little Harbor, and New Franklin. It was a clear 1, 2, 3 ranking. It was very obvious. That has now changed. I want all the kids in Portsmouth to have equal opportunity. I want them to have, the learning spaces they need. I want to provide them with all the tools and teaching spaces that every other kid gets. And I think we've shown that with the rankings. New Franklin is constantly ranked top 5, top 10 elementary schools in the state. So it shows you they've done the work. In that tour, we did see the inadequate spaces and stuff. I think the last time it was just mentioned that improvements were made at New Franklin, my father was actually assistant mayor in 2008, and because he was mentioning this today when I was talking with him. But it's been a while. I want to make sure, this is a big investment, I do want to make sure that we have space that is adequate. I want to make sure that we do it right. But like seeing the gym was, it looked the same since I was a 4th grader, 5th grader playing in there. The gym was really bad. The entrance, I want to see a safe entrance. I know we have a safe entrance to the high school. We have a safe entrance over at Dondero. I'd really like to see that over at New Franklin. And the one thing that really stood out for me, and I'm a coach at the high school, and I deal with, we get all kids of different shapes and sizes and learning disabilities and everything on the football team. And the fact that they have 3 special ed case managers sharing one room, to me, that really hit home for me, because I know how important that one-on-one uninterrupted instruction is, and to have noise and smells and everything else, and interrupting that and distracting the student, I can't imagine how difficult that is. So I'll be supporting of these improvements for the schools, but I'll let the other counselors speak.
And Councilor Boa, Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to thank Josie and Ava, their parents, all the other parents that came tonight, School Board Chair Nancy Clayburgh and School Board Member Byron Maddow, who spoke to us about the need for improvements at New Franklin School. It's clear from touring the facility, from looking at the other elementary schools, that not only do the improvements need to be made at New Franklin, but this is really an equity issue in our schools. Our schools should be similar for all students. The experience should be similar. We should have nice playgrounds at all of our schools. We should have nice facilities at all of our schools. It should be an environment where students feel safe learning, where teachers feel safe working, where everyone feels that they're getting what they need in a public school. And so, of course, I'm going to support these improvements to New Franklin School. I have quite a bit of frustration about this request coming forward to the council this year suddenly. And the reason I have that frustration is that I don't think that parents and teachers should have to come to the city council and beg for improvements to their school. I think that planning, we've known that the school was deficient for some time, and I don't know why it wasn't in the CIP budget earlier. I think that all the capital improvements that we should have for schools should be in the CIP. It should be really clear to us, so we're doing out planning for that for the next several years, and that we know exactly what needs to happen in all of our school facilities. That includes playgrounds. We had a surprise just last year around playgrounds. So it's not just that we were surprised by New Franklin improvements this year. We were surprised by the condition of playgrounds last year and all the improvements that needed to be made to playgrounds. And that wasn't new. clearly someone knew that these problems existed, but the council doesn't always see those things because we're not in the schools on a day-to-day basis. In fact, when I toured the schools just a week ago, that was the first time I'd seen two of them. I'd been to New Franklin, but I had not been in Little Harbor or Dondero. If we're not seeing those things, we need to have a better mechanism for identifying the improvements that need to happen in our public schools, because that's what's fair to parents and to students. And we absolutely shouldn't be asking PTAs to come up with funds to pay for improvements to facilities. PTAs should be there to help enrich the lives of the kids in the schools and to provide special programming for kids, not to pay for playgrounds or improvements to basketball courts. You'll hear later tonight, I have a motion that's coming up to ask for a work session with the school board so that the council can sit down with the school board and get their views on what needs to happen in the schools so we can make sure all of this planning is done for the future. And so we know in the out years what needs to happen in our schools, and so that the parents and students don't feel like they have to come to us and beg for improvements in schools. There should just be something that's part of our planning in the future. So thank you all for coming out. I'm sorry that you felt the need to do so, but I'm definitely supporting the improvements to New Franklin School.
Councilor Tabor. Councilor Cook.
Thanks to all the parents who came out, and I think Tammy Truax really defined for us how this deficient environment in New Franklin hurts teaching and learning. And Josie, David Calkins' daughter, and Wyatt, who spoke at the last public hearing on November 17th, you guys all made it very clear, and I support this. I wanted to also emphasize what Nancy Clayburgh was saying. We have consistently invested in maintaining our schools, and somehow we slipped on New Franklin for longer than we should have. And I've been looking at examples around the state, Rochester, Concord, even Saco, Maine, where cities didn't renovate their elementary schools until it ends up costing too much. And what happens then is, and this happened in Rochester and Concord and in Saco, Maine, they start consolidating schools. They abandon one of those schools and push kids into another one. So for those reasons, I think we have to invest this $10 million now rather than end up with two elementary schools that have 400 or 450 kids, as has happened in these other communities. So we're going to avoid a future council from having to face some tough choices, and will protect neighborhood-based elementary schools for decades to come, and I think that's important.
Councilor Tabor. Councilor Moreau.
I'd just like to echo a lot of the statements said by my former counselors. I also was on the tour looking at all three of the schools, and it was extremely clear from the tour of the inequities. And what really stood out to me was really the safety aspect, especially at New Franklin. It doesn't have that ability to have that entrance part where everyone can be screened before allowed into the building. So I am all for supporting these and supporting all the other comments that have been said.
Councilor Moreau. Thank you. Councilor Bagley.
I think this kind of highlights the importance of the CIP document, making sure we always have room to grow. I believe this all kind of came to light during the redistricting and the tours happened, and that's when a lot of the chatter at least got to our level. I was able to tour a couple months ago the New Franklin School and see the deficiencies, and I thought, okay, we're gonna have a fight on our hands because this is, a fairly expensive project. But I want to tip my hat to the planning board. When the CIP came to the council, this was already included, and it was included in fiscal year 27. So instead of having a fight, it was, I think there's broad agreement, certainly in this chambers, but in the community, that we discover there's an issue at one of our schools, and we're the type of community that when we discover something like that, we're going to go ahead and fix it.
Councilor Bagley. Any other comments on the schools? I'll say a couple words so Ava can get out of here and go home. As a parent, or as I guess, yeah, as a parent, I've been in New Franklin a lot. I think the thing that you forget as a parent, or need to, I guess, take a redistricting tour to really fully appreciate, is that the school is fantastic. The people that make it up are really that school. And it's hard for me to think about, when I think of a place that my daughter gets to go to, that I'd ever want her to go to another school, and I'm super excited. But that's in a lot of ways in spite of the facilities. Now, the one way that I was, and I didn't realize this until Ms. Marceau, or Tammy Truex read the statement from Ms. Marceau, and Ms. Marceau puts on a pretty impressive holiday concert, and that's going to be next Wednesday. But when we were kids, and we had music, it was in the space that now kind of the 3 breakout classrooms are for for those with special education needs. And I remember how expansive that was. I remember that you got to look out the window and you could play your recorder. Some people were a lot better at playing the recorder than I was, but I wasn't struck by the lack of space. And I think that that's been converted now into an area where we're focusing on special education. Is really kind of ties into the needs of our community. Has kind of outpaced our building. We need to have spaces so that not only the kids that actually are requiring that intervention, but everybody else in the classroom. There's sometimes when there's 4 or 5 adults in a classroom, even that itself can be incredibly challenging. And so what I hope happens, and I'll be supportive of this, I hope that we come back with a fantastic plan to look at the spaces that we have, to make sure that Ms. Truax doesn't have to focus on all the visitors and all the distractions, but can actually help kids fall in love with reading and learning about a library. I hope that the kids can have an understanding, spans the special spaces that they are going to need in order to be able to truly become the type of individuals that are going to go on and be fantastic middle school students. But I also hope that the kids that spoke here tonight and the kids that are following along at home know that the city is willing to put as much effort into New Franklin as they've put into New Franklin, because I've seen just an incredible amount from the PTO. I see Matt here, who was as adamant about getting the garden. I don't know if there's a better garden in the entire state. And so what I hope that the kids come away with adopting the CIP is that the work that they've been putting in, and the staff that has made New Franklin, pound for pound the best elementary school in the state, is recognized by their community, and that we're going to live up to our end of the bargain. So I appreciate you guys coming out many, many times, the emails that you've sent, the calls that I've received, being caught in the hallways all over Portsmouth, Market Basket, et cetera. It's effective, and I hope that as we move through this process, and it's not always easy construction, that we remember what makes New Franklin special, and that's not the building, that's the kids, that's the teachers, that's the parents, as we live up to our end of the bargain. So, thank you. Any other? Councilor Lombardi.
Yeah, I would just like to echo that it's clear that the people of New Franklin are exceptional. The kids, the teachers, you can see that by how it has become a statewide champion in schools. I think the argument to make the facility match the people is a good one. So I'm all for this.
Councilor Lombardi. Are there other comments or questions on the CIP at large? Councilor Moreau?
We were all emailed several questions about the fireboat, and some have come up during public comment tonight. I'd actually forwarded those questions to Chief McQuillan, and I was hoping he'd come up. He has answered a lot of them at the planning board level, but I thought it would be helpful to have him do it at the city council level as well.
Good evening, Your Honor, and members of the council. Bill McQuillan, Fire Chief. There had been some questions regarding the capital around the fireboat, and I did take the opportunity at the planning board last week to do a little bit of a deeper dive. I hope it's helpful for you here too. I will do my best to make sure I include the other questions that were asked. The fireboat in Portsmouth has been here. We've had a fireboat since at least 1990. It was a series of boats that were repurposed for fire department use. Back in that time, there was an early 80s vintage recreational boat that the fire department acquired and then was used as a rescue vessel. And then there was an onboard pump that was added to it and some rudimentary firefighting equipment. That boat was a 1983 Seahawks. It was used for a number of years. And then in 2005, there was a federal grant. There was 2 grants that the city actually was awarded to purchase a fireboat. Ultimately, the city received a $364,000 grant to purchase a fireboat. And that fireboat was a 33-foot jet boat, and it had an onboard pump on board. It was a Class A boat, which meant that it flowed more than 1,000 gallons of water a minute, and our folks were trained on it. That boat served here for about 10 years. Ironically, about the time that the warranty expired on the boat, that's about the time that the city made a decision to move on from it. It was disposed of. That boat, because it was a grant, ultimately was given to the town of Newcastle and then moved on to the city of Newburyport, Mass. But that was disposed of according to the rules of the grant when it was awarded, and the city didn't really have much of a say as to where it was supposed to go. As part of that, when the discussion was ongoing about the boat, part of the challenge was that there was a number assigned to the boat of about $50,000 a year of annual maintenance that needed to be applied to that jet boat. That number was obtained through the different costs that they knew were no longer going to be covered by warranty and some of the repairs that needed to be done. And then at the time, the decision was made to apply the costs of training that was ongoing on the boat and stipends to firefighters who were trained to operate the boat to that line item. So that's where that $50,000 number came from back then. About that time, the city then went on to purchase the current boat that we have in 2017. And at that time, that boat, along with a smaller boat, was purchased. And that smaller boat was kept on a trailer so that some of the inland waterways the boat could be utilized on, in addition to flooding conditions if they were warranted. But that 2017 boat is the boat that we currently now have. And since then, some of the things that have happened within the fire department is that some of the stipends that were used for the boat were rolled into the base salary to make sure that these stipends and these training incentives did not kick in, and that the firefighters were paid for the work that they were doing. And then we could plan that our crews were all trained equally to be able to utilize the boat and do the work that it needed. I told you previously that we had done 15 missions here within the city to rescue people. So as far as utilization, and then the other thing that I've been asked an awful lot about is whether or not we had any agreements in place to send the boat out of town. And the answer has been no, that we don't have any regional agreements, we don't have any signed documents that say that we will go here, we won't go there. Obviously, mutual aid is an issue, but just to give everybody an idea of where we're at. I had to go back to 2023, where we sent our boat up to Dover for a report of a boat fire. And then in 2023, we also sent our boat over to Newcastle for a diver in the water that was in distress. Since then, this year, there was an issue over in Elliott that the Coast Guard had a person having a medical emergency on a boat. And the Coast Guard called us because they needed our equipment to be able to get the person off the boat and onto either our boat or their boat to then back to the state pier so that we could transport them in an ambulance. So, kind of giving you an idea of where we're at, the $900,000 that we're looking for is to replace the current boat that we have with a similar system, however, that is safer for both the crews operating the boat and for the people that ultimately that we rescue in the boat. The challenge that we have now is that the boat was designed and it was built to be exactly 6 inches smaller than that would trigger the stipend clause in the union contracts for folks to be paid. So we built a boat to fit a need, and then that need still exists, and the challenge that we have is that we have this boat that when we pull people out of the water, they're exposed to the elements, and our crews are exposed to the elements on nights like this. So the thought was that we would get a boat similar in size to what we have now, or perhaps a little larger, where we would be able to accommodate the larger cabin, where we could put stretchers or backboards and be able to transport people once we pulled them from the water in an enclosed setting and allow our paramedics to be able to actually give them space to work on people. And then, again, keep the patient safe and keep our crews safe. So that's what this boat allows for, is a small pump. Again, as inflationary factors come in, whether it's tariffs, whether it's just costs of the boat, that's where we're looking to trim, shall we say, on the boat. I've worked with the Deputy City Manager Weber on trying to identify some potential vendors that we can utilize to be able to stay on target here, to be able to accomplish what we're after. But again, the goal here is for us to be able to protect our crews and the patients that we remove from the water for the number of times that we utilize the vessel. I hope I've answered everything, but I'm happy to stand here and make sure that I've answered whatever you need.
Thank you.
Councilor Bullock? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. I have a lot of questions on this, and I'm a little, I guess, concerned that it wasn't, in an out year last year in the CIP. It kind of is coming up and being presented in this year. We didn't have any.
Excuse me, Councilor. It was moved up last year.
Okay.
To this year, okay. from one of the out years.
All right, I stand corrected. Anyway, it's hard to swallow $900,000 on a boat. Does this include the cost you mentioned of training, maintenance, stipends? Includes everything?
So this is the buy the vessel, and get it here.
How big is the boat?
So, again, not knowing what we're going to get before the bid process, right? The boat, the idea is to get a boat large enough that we can put a backboard on.
All right.
With a center console.
I'm going to make a motion to move $900,000 in funding for the vehicle purchase to an out year to FY, I'll say 30. And if I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Have we made a motion yet to pass the CIP before we start amending it?
Oh, we do that after? You want to do that after?
We have to do it after.
The motion's
To amend
after.
Okay.
Be better.
All right, I'll be making that later then.
So, is there another question on the boat? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to know what the estimated lifespan is of a boat like this.
So therein lies the challenge. We're talking about putting a boat in the water, in the salt water, in the tide. Right now, we remove the boat the first week of December. So the boat came out last week so that we can maintain it, get it out of the water for the harsher conditions, and secondly, to protect our crews so that they're not out there in these conditions on a night like tonight. I could still deploy it, it just takes a bit of time, right?
Councilor Bagley?
Thanks, Your Honor, and maybe I'll speak more to it after Councilor Blaylock makes this motion. And these aren't so much questions, but just sort of, I think this particular purchase illustrates a challenge that we face here in Portsmouth. Where, obviously mutual aid is an essential part of first responders' obligations and duties. But for instance, I believe the closest tower truck we have is Dover, and vice versa. And the fireboat is partly due, in fact, to cutbacks at the Coast Guard, but it's difficult to ask the 23,000 residents of Portsmouth to make up for shortcomings of the federal government. That being said, the buck kind of stops with us, and if we don't do it, nobody does. So it then becomes a question of safety on the water, safety for our first responders. I agree with Councilor Blaylock. This is a tough one, but I also understand the need for it. I think there maybe is an opportunity at some point in the future to have a bigger conversation. It would certainly be easier to do this if we were getting pledges of $100,000 each from some of the surrounding communities, towards this that also may need to make use of our equipment. But I know that gets into the whole mutual aid agreement, and that's a sticky wicket. So just kind of food for thought. I understand your request, Chief. I respect your request, but I also acknowledge that it's a big ask of the citizens of Portsmouth to support these types of things when the citizens of our neighboring communities don't seem to have to contribute as much financially towards these safety apparatuses.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree. I mean, this is a difficult ask, so I agree with Councilor Bagley on this. But at the same time, we're in a tough position. We're on one of the most difficult waterways in the country to navigate. In the winter, when it's icy and cold, it's even more challenging to navigate that. And unfortunately, we are the largest city in this region. So no one else is coming to our rescue. Dover's is a long ways away, and that would be the next closest city that might have this kind of capability. So if the Coast Guard is not fulfilling the need, we are stuck providing that service. And I don't like the idea of our firefighters out on the water in terrible conditions, in the cold, in a very difficult to navigate river, without equipment that is going to keep them safe. So while I understand that this is a tough budget item, and it's a lot more money than I'd want to spend, sometimes we have to spend that money to keep people safe. And so I think it's important that we do that. It's very important to me that we keep our firefighters safe and that we keep people who are navigating the waters safe.
Question, Chief, and thank you, Councilor Cook. So would this boat be in the water year-round?
That would be the goal. Yes, Your Honor, that's the goal.
How many calls did we receive between December and, say, April of last year?
So I don't track those numbers. If we get a call and we don't go, right?
Who goes?
Hopefully the Coast Guard.
Okay.
Right. Well, the Marine Patrol, if they're in the water,
so
if they're staffed.
I guess those are like, or I understand the ask and I understand the desire, but I guess like what I'm having trouble with is it was in a former CIP for a lesser amount of money, and the amount of money is higher amount of money. I understand that from a fire truck standpoint, there's not a lot of vendors that are doing that work, and there's congressional inquiry on that, and that's why, maybe the RFPs are not going to be as effective when we're looking to get a fire truck, because there's just not a big, I don't know the landscape for boat manufacturers that would fit this description, but what we're talking about here, more than a boat that is $650,000 more than was previously budgeted, but a change in terms of a response in the winter months here, and without having a conversation around with our neighboring communities or the Coast Guard themselves on whether or not there's other means to be able to deliver this. That's the thing that I'm having, difficulty in supporting this, because we're asking for a larger boat, but a change in the kind of the scope of what Portsmouth is doing. That might be necessary. I could see that it would be, but would certainly want to understand where the Coast Guard is as a part of this. Originally, I guess, a part of the fireboat was to be able to, respond to, marine fires, or potentially, go to other parts that are inaccessible and get there faster. But this seems like a scope of or an increase of the scope of what we're trying to do. And I don't necessarily have the answers from a Coast Guard perspective, or how many calls we're missing out on and how that's affecting our responsiveness right now.
I understand that, and I appreciate the fact that it's a policy decision, and either way it goes, right, we'll continue to do what we have to do. I think the challenge I have is trying to thread that needle where I recognize that what we have could be improved upon, and we could be doing a better job of what we're doing, right, while at the same time not going back to the previous model where we had this vessel that was bigger than we needed, and as a result, perhaps we had a little bit of that mission creep, to your point, where because it was here, people would call it, right? Because it had that capability and it was able to go that far. That's not what we're looking to do here.
Certainly, I guess the concern for me kind of stems to the change in mission where we're going to be deploying a boat year-round, and without having the understanding of if we're going to be in a conversation with the Coast Guard around the docks, et cetera, about, keeping a boat here. These are things that I would love to be able to, I guess, have more information on before we're able to commit to a larger boat to serve a broader mission that I don't know who is serving. I guess I just don't know who serves that mission of, I'm guessing it's the commercial fishermen at this point. And if that's, I guess, the blind spot that I have. I don't know of many residents that are out in the waters at this point. But I could certainly be swayed from a commercial fisherman standpoint, but I'd want to know where they're getting help and assistance at the moment. And that's more of a comment. I'm sorry, Chief.
Quite all right.
Any other questions for Chief McCollum while we have him here? Councillor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor. I hesitate to even bring it up, but it is something that I know we've had discussions about since I've been on the council. But the number of rescues that are, and it's very difficult to track, but when people are going off the bridges, and there are 3 of them, and the frequency seems to have been increased in the last couple of years for whatever reasons. But it could also be a data logging issue because there's multiple state agencies, multiple local agencies that respond to these, and not all of these incidents are recorded in one place. That is one reason I'd be leaning towards supporting this. Is that a good reason or a bad reason, or does that help at all in those situations?
No, that's an excellent point. Thank you. There has been an uptick in the amount of activity around the bridges, and I think you saw the state step in and start with the Department of Safety and the Homeland Security to bring in all the agencies that go to these events to try and coordinate and come up with a better response plan. Some of the challenges we have are, to your point, perhaps the call originates in Maine, and now it's an assist agency type call for our agency. But whatever it is, right, being able to track it, and then secondly, identify who's the lead agency and who is making the shots with respect to how long we're going to do a search, where we're going to search, right? The Coast Guard certainly has jurisdiction in that, but then as these things play out and they kind of get bigger and bigger, trying to bring in more agencies to make sure that we encompass the whole the whole area. Communications have been a real challenge, right? Because you're talking about all these different agencies, whether it's Marine Patrol, whether it's Fish and Game, whether it's the local fire departments, whether it's even being able to communicate with the Navy security forces who are stationed out there in the river, but have a much different mission, but to at least be able to communicate, say what happened, what did you see, right? Those types of challenges, that's part of the reason that these task forces exist. And then from there, once we start talking about the operational issues, that's where we got into some of the other working groups around some of the infrastructure on the bridges, on mental health in general, and what we can do. So it's a complex problem that we're actively involved in trying to find solutions, but I can't stand here tonight and tell you that we have any answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Moreau.
Not so much questions. I just wanted to bring up, I hope everyone got a chance to look at the request from Planning Board and their vote on that was in the packet regarding the new
Would you
parking
like
garage.
to speak for the public, to bring that to the public's attention?
Yep, so the planning board had a long conversation about the $150,000 that's under fiscal year 27 for the new parking garage. And they really feel that we need to take the study that was done and the report that came back seriously. And by putting in at least a placeholder for $3 million, it gives us some flexibility as far as looking for a facility and maybe doing some initial planning towards one. And maybe that number should be something different than that, but that was what they sort of came up with as far as a number that would be a working number to really, try to find a good site location and do some real basic outreach as far as where this would work, how it would work, and keeping in mind that this doesn't actually affect our general fund or our, bond, because it all comes out of parking revenues and it's bonded under parking. So, the revenues from parking have been very strong in these last few years. We know that that is a utility the city makes its most money from, is through parking. So they feel very strongly that moving in that direction where the study really says we're going to need it, that we should put some money behind it moving forward.
Councilor Boyle.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Moreau.
I agree, Councilor Moreau. I think, I wanted to kind of speak to the public a little bit. I always get residents that are they get angry about studies, spending taxpayer money on studies. And I do too, I'll be honest, I lose sleep over it. But I hope these more look at an investment, these more look at, I hope these studies aren't just bringing back, telling us the problems that we already know about or the challenges. But I hope, they'll look at any possibility for any grants or any opportunities, but kind of look at it as investments to that goal. I'm not just speaking about the parking garage, any other studies. I know there's a couple other ones in the CIP. The artist live workspace. I would love to have another, button factory and more space for artists to live and work. But I want to make sure that $65,000 is spent wisely, and it's not just we get a report that says, oh, you need a property, you need, all the stuff that we already know about.
Councilor Bullock, any other questions before there's a motion to adopt the CIP? Do we have a motion?
So
Your
moved.
Honor, I move to adopt the capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2027 to 2032 as presented.
Second.
Any amendments? Councilor Moreau.
I'd move that we amend element sheet BI 26 PW 54, the new parking garage, to add $3 million under bond lease parking.
Second.
There's a second. Councilor Moreau. Anything to add?
All the former statements that I said previously, I thought it was a good idea. It's not taking away from any of our other funding or bond lease issues or, debt to ratio. We have the parking funds, there, and let's use them, and let's really try to find a site that works for a new parking garage, or maybe it's a renovation to existing. I don't have the answers, but this money will help us find a solution to the problem that's already been identified.
Councilor Bagley.
I'll speak briefly to this and I'll support it. I think it was 10 years ago I came here as a citizen and spoke against the Foundry Place parking garage at the Worth lot, with the thought that, you know, self-driving cars are right around the corner, Uber and Lyft were replacing everything. Now that I've dug in and done the homework, I see the revenue that the city gets from parking, which helps support keeping our downtown maintained and cleaned and a nice place to visit. And looking at the numbers and the increase in housing, which I think most of us support because there's just more people, and without more supply of housing, prices are going to continue to be crazy. The cornerstone is going to be making sure the city provides enough parking, but we do it in a way where we generate a profit from it. It's not putting a burden on our taxpayers, and it's a better utilization of the land in an ecological way, because what you typically have in broad strokes is residents parking there at night when they're sleeping, and visitors and people who work in our community parking there during the day when they're at work or when they're being visitors. So we get much better utilization out of parking spaces that are open for anyone to use, and because they're a paid amenity, it's one of the few places in the city where we provide something. It doesn't actually put a burden on the taxpayer. So I think all of the data shows that we need to move forward with this, and the real discussion, in my opinion, is where that place is going to be, not whether or not we need to do it.
Councilor Bagley, any other? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I've been reluctant to support a new parking garage because I've hoped for a long time that we would have alternative transportation options and better alternative transportation parking options for bicycles, for mopeds in our space, that we could delay the need for a parking garage. It is clear we will ultimately, though, need one, and the parking study was pretty clear about that. I'm still hoping that we have alternative transportation options that delay the immediate need so that we actually do have time to get a new parking garage in place before that need is critical. So I will support this because I do know we need it. But again, I truly hope that everyone here will also support alternative transportation options.
Councilor Dutton.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was likely up here when Councilor Bagley came to speak about self-driving cars instead of the Foundry Place garage. Just a cautionary tale on the Foundry Place garage. One reason why it cost more than was initially hoped was that we were purchasing individual pieces of land. So obviously I won't be up here, but ideally, if you do pursue another garage, try to stick with city-owned property. And to Councilor Cook's point, hopefully after this vote, I'll be making a motion regarding finding alternatives and public transportation as an alternative.
Thank you, Councilor Dutton. I guess a question for Councilor Moreau. Where did the $3 million number come from?
It was truly just what the planning board discussed, and it was thrown out there as a number of something, and we're not guaranteed it is the right number, but it'll be a number that'll actually get us started in the search for the solution.
If I can add to that,
Okay.
It's roughly about 10% of what is currently projected as the total project cost.
Okay. I guess the only concern that I have with this, and it's not one out of not needing it, and I think that all of the discussions around transit and density, like if we can have more parking in the downtown or thereabouts close, we can have more housing that's not dependent upon a bunch of parking spaces, and people will not feel as though we're not investing. I guess my concern is that if we do this and it's not city-owned property, we would immediately kind of put a number on what we've allocated to this from a negotiation standpoint. If we were negotiating, like, so if we had the money and somebody had a property that was 2.5 million and they said, well, you got 3 allocated to this, this would be pretty good that if you use that. So I'm just wondering, since it's a special, it could be a special appropriation and we have money that's allocated, why would we, I guess, allocate more money if we don't end up at a place where we are using city-owned land?
I don't know that can we find city-owned land? I mean, we've looked at city-owned land a lot, and there might be the possibility of repurposing city-owned land, but it would be more of a repurpose, like the lower lot or something like that, in order to truly find something. So I think we've looked at a lot of city-owned property, and we might have an ability out there, but I think we need the funds available in order to be able to find that solution. And what is the final solution? I'm not saying this is what we're going to negotiate with. I'm saying it's what we're going to use to be able to find the solution of what works.
Be supportive. I'm a little concerned that if we were to be negotiating and we did that, because we have the ability, and we should, as somebody mentioned in public comment, we should always just put a little disclaimer on what the non-public is. But we do have the ability to negotiate for land in non-public for the very reasons that we would not want to tip our hand on what the amount was. I guess I would just be concerned that if we put the money in here, somebody that might be in the process of selling to us would look at us, and that would be the mark of which they might come back and say, well, you have $3 million, the price is $3 million. I'm sure there's angels out there, but
There's not a lot of angels out there, but
It's my understanding that the money would be used for design.
So for design,
Correct.
is that specific, is that in there that this could not be used for land acquisition costs?
we absolutely could put that in
amend
there.
it to say that.
We could make that part of the motion.
Councilor Cook?
Your Honor, I think the city would be surprised to find a lot large enough for a garage that would be $3 million or less that is close to the downtown area. So I don't think that there will be any illusions that this $3 million is for land acquisition or that that's the total, the city's budget for land acquisition if we're purchasing property near downtown.
You want more from me?
No? Just one more discussion?
I agree with the fact that I didn't see this as actually going out and buying land. I saw this as funds needed to really come up with a design and how are we going to go about actually getting a new parking garage. So, no one really ever talked about buying a piece of property to do so. That was not part of the discussion with the $3 million. So, you wanted to put an amendment on it?
So does the 32 million as estimated, is that, or 32.5, is that not inclusive of land acquisition costs in the new parking garage?
I'm going to say that's correct, because based on 650 spaces at 50,000 per space, that gets you to 32.5, exclusive of land acquisition. Does not include land acquisition.
All right. So it's not in there, I guess. Councilor Bagley?
I would just echo Councilor Cook's point. I mean, if we found a parcel large enough for a parking garage downtown for $3 million in today's market, we'd almost have to jump at it. So I don't think that's going to be an issue where we're setting the selling price for the prospective seller.
All right. Do we need a
Vote
roll
on
call?
the amendment.
Yeah, okay.
You do need a roll call.
We need a roll call. All right. Kelly, will you please take the roll?
On the amendment, yes. Oh, sorry. Assistant Mayor Kelly, are you still with us?
Yes, Kelly.
Thank you. Councilor Tabor?
Yes.
Councilor Cook?
Yes.
Councilor Denton?
Yes.
Councilor Blaylock?
Yes.
Councilor Bagley?
Yes.
Councilor Moreau?
Yes.
Councilor Lombardi?
Yes.
Mayor McCackron?
Yes.
Unanimous?
Any, Councilor Blaylock?
Your Honor, I move to amend the CIP by moving VE-25-FD-02, vehicle replacement, Marine number 1, $900,000 from FY27 to out year FY30. If I get a second, I will speak to it.
I'll second for discussion purposes.
So looking at this, and You know, I mean, I try to look at the CIP I try to look at every line item. I try to be very thorough. And in mindful of, you know, come next June, we're going to be this is leading us into our budget, right? This is what capital improvements are we planning on trying to make? But I also try to look at, like, what don't we need? What can we cut? This $900,000 boat really jumped at me. I understand we moved it last year to this year, but it was $250,000. I think that's why I got really, like, I don't remember a $900,000 boat. I do remember the $250,000 boat. But I think I need to hear more, or just, you know, that we've explored all chances of grants. I've seen that, like, you know, Mobile, Alabama got a port security grant to pay for their $1 million boat. I want to make sure we've explored all these other options like that. I know we had 15 missions this year. Our boat we still have, it sounds like it's not out of service yet. You know, we're appropriating a lot of capital funds for the fire department this year for FY27. You know, we have the tower truck. I'd like to, you know, kind of focus on that. But $900,000 I just think is too much right now with the information I've been given.
Councilor Bagley.
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. I share a lot of Councilor Blaylock's concerns, and I might offer a friendly amendment, or at least for discussion. And my thought process is, and we've done this before with, I think, the EV chargers, where we allocated money for a number of years, and then because of the long lead times and everything, we weren't able to put them in until several years after they were in the capital improvement plan. And my thought, which I would love to hear the other councilors' thoughts on, is if we did fiscal year 27 with $250,000, and we put in fiscal year 28 the I believe it's a remainder of $450,000. And that way we'd be showing intent that we plan to do this, which may give us leverage going to different communities and different government organizations like the Coast Guard and saying, hey, the city's willing to put up a chunk of money. We'd really like you to contribute to this as well, because it would help all of us with our mission. But it's kind of like a way to show intent and show good faith, but not actually spend the money in this year.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Councilor Moreau, and then...
Are you talking the remainder, so 650, not
Yes.
450?
Yes.
Just one.
Yep.
I can't read my writing.
It should be 650.
Councilor Tabor, and then Councilor Denton.
I'm going to support the CIP as it is for the fire department boat. You know, it's $900,000, and I think we're thinking that that's the money we're going to go out and spend today. It'd be carried over 20 years at maybe $45,000, $47,000 a year on a $160 million budget to give us a craft that is warm, protects our firefighters from the elements, takes victims of accidents and protects them from the elements, and can handle the winter conditions on the river, and you know, saves lives.
Councilor Tabor, Councilor Denton.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, I was up here, I believe it was 2016, when the fire department went to properly dispose of the initial fireboat that they got using Department of Homeland Security grants, and they were actually looking at donating it to a town up on one of the lakes. I'm not sure if it was Laconia, but it was a town that definitely didn't have the money for it. But once word got out that Portsmouth was giving away a free boat, the residents of Newcastle showed up en masse and demanded the boat. And the reason for that story is no one's going to likely come to donate money for a boat. It'll likely be either we fund the boat or there's not a boat.
Councilor Cook. Thanks, Councilor Denton.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a serious concern about the capabilities of the Coast Guard to continue to respond in the river to major crises. And the reason I do is that they've been using our dock as their docking location for some time now, and they're about to lose that space for docking. So they won't be able to respond quickly. Their prior dock that was out at Newcastle was damaged, and they haven't had the federal funds to repair it. So we don't even know where the Coast Guard is going to be docking in the near future. So the idea that we're going to be dependent upon the Coast Guard to be our primary response, and we're not going to have adequate response capability when we might have a commercial fisherman or somebody who unwisely goes out on a boat in February and falls off in the river to rescue, makes me nervous. As a resident of Portsmouth, I want to make sure that we have that capability. And our fire department is the department that provides ambulance service and provides medical services for people who are in need. So we have to continue to provide that service and know that we're providing it adequately to individuals who use the river on a regular basis. This is ultimately a marine town.
Your Honor, if I can provide clarification based on what Councilor Denton shared, you would need 100% of the amount of the boat authorized in order to sign a contract.
Seeing no other hands raised, I have, I guess, just more questions coming into this than I have answers right now. So one of the things that jumps out is we've mentioned the Coast Guard. Have we heard, has the Coast Guard informed us that they do not possess the ability to respond to emergencies? The largest change that we're undertaking here is discussing extending our service through the winter months, but we don't have any data at the moment of calls that we have refused as a part of that. I just think that this is a very large departure from what we currently staff without the information that could come in that said this is a need that we're needing to fill. The Coast Guard, to my knowledge, hasn't shared that they cannot respond to vessels. I haven't heard about the other towns, and I would agree with Councilor Denton that they're probably not going to come up with money, but it would be at least nice to have that as a part of the mutual aid response if this is a capital expense that we're going to take on. I agree with Councilor Tabor that, adjusted over time, this is not a huge expense, and it might be worth it, but nothing is adjusted over time, and I just don't see the need that we're solving. If we couldn't respond to X, Y, or Z, then I would be more in favor of supporting this at the amount that meant that those folks that were responding in the dead of winter could be covered, but I just don't see that at the moment. So for those reasons, I can't be supportive of it in this year for this amount without either more information on the costings or on the acute need that we're facing as a community for expending these funds. So I guess we'll have Councilor Bagley.
Just an inquiry, this would need 6 votes to pass or 5 votes? This amendment?
Well, the overall, the CIP, once you get to the final vote, is a 2/3 vote, I believe.
No, because we're not committing money.
Because you're not doing the money
So it's a
yet,
standard
right?
5?
Yep, it's 5.
Okay.
So the friendly amendment's on the floor?
I would, if a friendly amendment was considered to move it to fiscal 28 instead of fiscal 30,
Yeah,
I'd be
I'd
willing
do
to
that.
support
Yeah,
it.
I simply picked FY 30 because there was nothing else. You know what I mean? There was nothing in that column. There was nothing under the fire department, nothing in vehicle replacement. So I'd be happy to switch it to FY 28.
All of it, or the
Yeah, I'd be happy to all of it.
250, 60?
All of it. All of it.
Okay.
Kelly, did you get that new one? We're moving it to, or
Good.
the amendment moves it to 28.
28, yep, from 30.
All right, we'll have any further discussion? We'll take a roll call vote.
Yep. So this is to pass the CIP?
No,
as-
this is for the
The
amendment on
amendment,
the.
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Yes, you're correct. Sorry. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
No.
No. Counselor Tabor?
No?
Counselor Cook?
No.
Counselor Denton?
No.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Council Moreau,
No.
Council Lombardi,
No.
Mayor McCachran.
Yes.
Yes. Motion fails. 6 to 3.
Any other amendments? Councilor Denton.
Your Honor, I motion to modify CIP request BI 26PL29 microtransit study to change funding source from federal grant funds to capital outlay general fund and/or revenues in FY 2027 and FY 2028, and rename it Opportunities to Expand Use of Public Transit Study. If I get a second, I'll speak.
Second?
So this motion is essentially a motion which both Councilors Cook and Councilors Moreau made at the prior meeting. I believe it was tabled and referred to the Sustainability Committee to first review several previous studies, parking strategic study, and then a presentation that was done on microtransit to the EDC. The Sustainability Committee, we met on November 20th. After reviewing those studies and the EDC presentation, the meeting was well attended with everyone from the head of Coast to the Deputy City Manager, Sean Clancy, to give that perspective on it. We identified that the parking strategy plan did indeed call for further study on the subject, because there were several gaps that were left. And the funds here, so essentially what we're looking at doing is, instead of hoping to get state or federal funding in the next 2 years and then not getting it being funded in general funds, is to fund it with general funds this upcoming year. However, it wouldn't just be a study for microtransit. That's why it's being taken out of the main title. We know what microtransit would cost. The presentation to the EDC gave several options there. Here, the funds would be used essentially for request for proposals to fill in the gaps, and the gaps would ideally be identified by a task force of people, whoever is chosen. But our thoughts, for example, would be a member from the Sustainability Committee, member from the EDC, member from Parking, Traffic, and Safety, people from the actual community who work in hospitality, to see what gaps actually exist out there. So ideally, that task force would help staff write the RFP, which this money would fund, and then that would go out, the study would come back and identify, hey, here's how we fill in all these gaps, which were previously identified by the other studies. That said, if there are any specific questions to the Sustainability Committee's report back, I'll gladly suspend the rules to invite the lines up to help answer questions.
Councilor Denton. Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Sharon. And I think the formation of a task force on this is not a bad idea. There definitely was a disconnect between the EDC, Parking, Traffic, and Safety, the Sustainability Committee, the services that Coast provide. I think, coalescing all of that data together has a lot of merit. I do question the need for money at this point in the process. It may be that we put together a task force and then they come back to us and say we need $50,000 or $100,000 for a study. But I don't know if we have enough data to put a price tag on what we need. And my reluctance is, if we give the money that we spend on this study, if we were to allocate it to Coast, that's a lot of senior medical rides that they could provide. So I want to be cognizant of not spending our transportation funds in a way that doesn't get us the most value per dollar. And I feel like there may be not enough data yet to know how much we need for the studies.
Any response or other comments? And maybe I'll just phrase it just so it's shifting from taking the recommendations which moved originally federally funded, which unlikely to happen, to but not just for microtransit. I guess I'm not.
Correct.
Okay. But explain, I guess, the way in which we're getting to the $50,000 amount?
So it would be $100,000. That was the amount which was originally allocated by the city for this, in hopes of getting it in the next 2 upcoming years in either federal or state funding, and if not, funding that would be put forward by the city itself.
And just, sorry, just one quick question. So, but this is no longer a microtransit study, it's a...
Correct. So the thought process would be to include microtransit in it. So for those who are unaware, the general concept of microtransit is whether you use an app on your phone or go to a computer, you could have a vehicle pick you up at the closest corner to where you are and bring you to the closest corner of where you're going. So it's a small niche. It's very popular. It's being done in different localities throughout the U.S., but we know how much microtransit in itself would likely cost from that EDC presentation, whether it be we just want them to create an app or we want to purchase vehicles and pay for drivers and do all that. So we have some idea what that would cost. The focus of this study would not just be microtransit. It would be to fill in prior gaps identified, but to also have microtransit as an element in the final response.
Okay, and then I just, Councilor Cook, why would this not be a part of, I guess, the master plan? In terms of transportation as a part of the master plan, why would we have a separate study outside of the major kind of infrastructure zoning changes planning that we're going to have as a part of the master plan study?
And the only response I could give to that is this study was one that was proposed in the essentially in the climate action plan, and one that was I believe brought forward in prior years, and the city thought it made sense to have separate.
Okay, Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. And I think I could address the mayor's question to some degree. That there's no guarantee that in the master planning process that this is actually addressed. And this is one of the things that the Sustainability Committee has been asking for, and that was asked for in the Climate Action Plan. Choosing not to put the money in this next CIP budget means you're kicking the can down the road 1.5 years. Because this CIP budget doesn't come into play until next July for a full year. So we're talking about kicking this can down the road through the next council term and not having funding for this until the very end of potentially the next council term, if we had funding then. So if we keep delaying our efforts to try to plan for alternative transportation, we're putting ourselves in a position that we are going to not only need that new parking garage sooner rather than later, but we're going to be much more dependent on continued automobile transit than we would like to be as a community. The best way that we can help address climate change is to be proactive. And so choosing not to fund something is essentially saying we're not going to do it for another 1.5 years. That we're going to have people sit around and talk to each other, but we don't have any funding if we want to proceed. And I think that that's a serious problem because the Climate Action Plan wasn't adopted just a few days ago. The Climate Action Plan was adopted a while ago, and we still haven't taken action. So I think it's really critical we take action as soon as possible on initiatives like this, because otherwise we're just not going to address them.
Thank you, Councilor Cook. Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. And, I mean, I agree with the comments. I guess I just don't really understand what we're spending the money on in detail. So it's difficult for me to support something if I don't know what type of study it would be proposed to whom. I mean, we don't even really have an RFP or anything yet to work from.
That's fair, and again, there's several gaps identified in the major study, and the goal would be to get this task force of people who have the most stake in the game to figure out what exactly we're looking for to answer and fill those gaps. And then the study, the RFP that would be produced from that task force would ideally say, like, hey, how could this actually be done? So you start with what gaps need to be filled specifically to Portsmouth, and then the RFP would answer, here's how you could do it.
I think I understand that. I guess like the issue, there's not a, so would this be a, I don't, and forgive me if it's in there, but the card that we have in here, it would be changed?
Yes, it should be changed to reflect that it's bigger than just microtransit.
Okay. I guess the things that I worry about taking, and I know that the placeholder in this administration from federal state is not, it's not going to be acted upon because that money is not likely to be there. But that money is also not likely to be there for coast on the state level as well. And so I guess I wouldn't be opposed to potentially putting it in next year's CIP, but we haven't formed the committee and we haven't actually done the RFP, and we're not in a position to, like, we don't know what the RFP is. We know what it's going to cost to do microtransit. It's $1 million, and that's all our coast funding at the moment, or a little more, but that's all of our coast funding at the moment. So I guess I don't know what's the goal of the study? Filling the gaps of the parking utilization study?
Correct.
Okay. And are these the highest, I guess, in terms of parking utilization, are these the highest needs that have been identified by the parking utilization study in order for us to address first? Are these the ones that are the priority of sustainability? Not a wrong answer, but I'm just, in terms of the unmet demand or unmet questions of the parking utilization study.
I do not believe it was the highest, most critical thing identified by the parking utilization study.
Okay. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think it's important to remember that it's not just the parking utilization study that's critical here, but it's also the climate action plan.
Certainly. I guess if this was I understand and I get and I agree with the desire to, is a study that includes microtransit, which we know is $1 million to implement here in the city in 2018 dollars? When was that? 2019? When did
it was after COVID, like
Was that
21, I think.
was it?
Oh, it depends on which study we're talking about.
So I guess like the concern that I have is not studying something is like what is actually like what are we doing like on like the money is it going towards? I know like I guess from the conversations that we've had with Coast what $100,000 extra to Coast routes would do in terms of routes, and I'm always worried that if we're studying something that in the back of my mind is going to cost more money than we currently have allocated to this. Or our entire transportation budget, it's hard to justify when we could be putting this money into a time when Coast is going to probably be asking for more money out of the city of Portsmouth because there's going to be less federal dollars and certainly no state dollars here. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. The way that I think about this funding is to look at other opportunities to potentially supplement Coast service. For example, a shuttle loop, not just microtransit, but think about other opportunities the city could take to help supplement the Coast service where Coast cannot provide full service to the city of Portsmouth. When you think of like a shuttle loop, what you're talking about is providing transit that crosses the city in ways that Coast does not. Coast acts more like spokes on the wheel for the city of Portsmouth, so you can't easily go from Elwyn Park, for example, to the hospital on Coast bus service. So how do we find ways to best supplement that? And this study not only would help us look at a potential of, say, a shuttle loop service, but what is the best way to address that? Is the best way to address a shuttle loop service providing supplementation to Coast service so that Coast provides that, or would the best way to do that be to provide it as a city? So having these funds there allows us to hire the experts that we need to help us identify best ways to provide additional transportation options within the city. And to do that sometime in the next year and a half, instead of doing that out a year and a half.
To study it in the next year and a half.
Correct, because we can't do anything until we know what is the best option for us. So we don't know if putting money into Coast bus service is going to, putting additional funds there is going to be the best thing to serve Portsmouth residents. Our experience is that we're having to put more and more money into Coast bus service, and yet we're seeing continual cuts because of cost cuts in federal and state funding for Coast. So maybe we need to look at ways that we can better supplement Coast bus service, noting that Coast is not going to be getting any more federal and state dollars in the next few years. And so how can we provide services for residents who've been denied transportation and don't have that transportation option through Coast?
Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. As part of PTS, we get to look at the Coast stuff more often, and I certainly had concerns this year and last year with the increases. However, I think Coast is one of those things that we have to support. It's an essential function of the community, so I always worry about anything we do that might jeopardize the support we give Coast. It might be putting him on the spot, but I do know the executive director of Coast, Brad Nichols, is here in the audience. I don't know if he has any insight that he could share with us that would be helpful.
I could just add to that. Brad was there at this meeting and did express interest if a task force is formed and if an RFP is put out to help see where the money could be spent to fill the gaps.
We could suspend the rules. I guess like my general consensus is that we have we have a CIP process in which we have put forth, goes to the planning board. Like the planning board did the planning board take this up at the last meeting to discuss microtransit?
I don't think we did. No. I'm trying to remember, but I
don't
remember.
I guess the concern that I have is that we're taking a placeholder, a federally funded placeholder for microtransit, and we're expanding that placeholder after creating a task force to discuss this, to fund a study that we will put out an RFP for, but the placeholder is not currently in the CIP because we had done that simply for microtransit, and I think have gotten the answer on microtransit in that it's going to be right now very expensive to be able to fund on the city level. And so that we're taking something that was in the CIP, shifting the intent of that, and then asking for actual dollars. That, I guess, is from a process standpoint, I'm not very comfortable with shifting this from something that has gone through the citizen request, was spoken to very passionately by many people of the Sustainability Committee, and then found that we had already done that study or had that presentation, knew the costs associated with it, and then repurposed something that was already in there for a need that we could feel strongly about, but is outside of the CIP. Councilor Tabor?
Just to echo what Councilor Cook said, I think we have to look at, and the parking study does mention shuttle loops and alternate transportation. I think we have to look at the alternatives to the $30 million garage. And then once we've exhausted that examination and we know what's possible, then take up the parking garage. I think that's the sequence of things.
Well, in the sequence that we followed this evening, we've allocated, $3.15 million to the parking garage. So I guess that's the difficulty.
But not next year.
No, next year. It was FY27. So I guess I don't know how we would spend it. I guess that's the disconnect, is that there was a placeholder for $150,000 for a needs assessment, and we took that to align to what would be the larger project costs of that, taking parking revenue in order to pay for that. But we're now talking about a micro stint or a larger kind of connectivity issue, and that's where I don't see it's hard to follow the expanding of that one capital improvement page to study this.
Okay, so we've got competing transportation narratives, either a garage or alternatives to a garage. And we know what a garage does. We know it can be paid out of parking revenue. We know it doesn't impact the tax rate. That's all very attractive, but it's also a very expensive long-term asset. And it just seems to me, regardless of how this falls in the 27, 28, 29 buckets, we need to know what our alternate transportation options are. I think if it turns out that we can take some of the demand for the parking garage away by a shuttle loop, then we can do that garage in out years, and it costs our city less. So I think that to me is the case for looking at these transportation options.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think if we went back over all the public comment that we've received on the microtransit study element sheet, you would find that the majority of the public comment wasn't specifically just about microtransit. It was about all kinds of alternative transportation options, including things like a shuttle loop. In fact, that was the majority of the discussion, not on microtransit. So this element sheet has actually been misnamed for a long period of time. It wasn't supposed to be called a microtransit study. It was supposed to be a study of alternative transportation. And I think Councilor Denton does a good job at suggesting a renaming of the sheet because that's really what has been discussed from the very beginning of our discussions of this issue more than a year ago.
Councilor Denton.
And I'll just add, I guess, counter one of your points to the process. This is part of the process.
It is, yeah.
Where the Sustainability Committee's role per ordinance is to give advice and guidance on implementing the climate action plan. And that's exactly what this is here, not necessarily going to the planning board and going through the process, but it's to give advice and guidance on the climate action plan, and that's exactly what this is.
Is there, Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. And a little bit to Councilor Tabor's comments. I think there's some competing things. There's goals of sustainability, which is multimodal transportation, human-powered transportation, ride-sharing, shuttle loops. The CIP acknowledges those goals, but also is a financial document. I think it's important that we realize parking revenues fund the Christmas trolley. Parking revenues funded the shuttle before we had Foundry Garage out towards where the Community Connect Church is. We are funding all of these transportation initiatives with parking revenues. If we build a parking garage, that will put stress on our parking revenues, but in the long term, it is cost neutral or more likely cost positive to the city where we're generating revenue. Any one of these transit studies that we're looking at, shuttles, micro loops, microtransit, enhanced coast, are cost negative to the residents of Portsmouth. They cost money that are primarily paid for with parking revenues. So if we made a conscious decision to go towards microtransit instead of a second garage, we'd be talking about spending millions of dollars a year on that solution versus a garage, which in my opinion would either be cost neutral or cost positive. $100,000 goes a very long way with coast. I don't think we get as much benefit from a study, rushing into a study. I would support putting it into an out year, fiscal '28. But I just don't think we are prepared to spend $1 million a year on microtransit. And until we're prepared to make that type of contribution, a study that is going to promote that is good money after bad, in my opinion.
Councilor, still have
I just would like to bring to everyone's, where sustainability is actually just trying to change the header. If you actually read the project description, it is to expand public transit using a variety. It's microtransit, shuttle loop, bus, or hybrid approach. So the project description already speaks to the change in the header. So I don't have a problem with that. And it also talks about the fact is in fiscal year 27 and 28, they've made it state and federal funding, of which we're all pretty sure there's not going to be any available. So maybe the compromise is that we move fiscal year 28 up to general funds. And that at least gives us 1 year sooner that we might be able to move something forward to look at alternatives. Because I think we're going to need both. I hate to say that, but I do think we're going to need more public transportation options, and we're going to need a parking garage. But maybe we'll need a smaller parking garage. And I think we need to know that before we put a shovel in the ground. So I think it would be better to be able to have this solution sooner rather than later.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Councilor Murrow, for explaining very eloquently what I've been trying to explain on the element sheet. I think it's important to move this funding up and to have it in fiscal year 27. It's incredibly frustrating to me to sit up here, having served on the council for 4 years already, 2 terms already, going into a 3rd term on the council, and the thought that I would be able to serve 3 terms on the city council and still not get anywhere with regards to alternative transportation that's just incredibly frustrating, because that's something that I ran on my very first council election, on getting a climate action plan in place and making sure that we had alternative transportation and we were supporting alternative transportation in this community. So the fact that we've delayed this, first we delayed it because we were waiting to have a climate action plan. Well, once we adopt the climate action plan, then we'll take action. And okay, now we have a climate action plan. Now the Sustainability Committee needs to prioritize what they want in the climate action plan. Well, the Sustainability Committee did that. And they came forward and they put together citizen requests for the CAP budget. And they did it not this year, they did it last year. And then they emphasized it again this year, that they wanted it. And they've come to every single meeting and testified in front of us and said, this is what we want. This is our priority. And this council that says that climate action is a priority for the council needs to actually prioritize climate action and alternative transportation. So I think it's really critical that we do this in fiscal year 27. That means it's not going to even start. We won't have any funding even available until July of 2027, and we're not talking about a lot of funding.
I don't think we're not talking about a lot of funding. The fear that I have, not on the study, is that we don't yet have, or we have costs from a number of years ago on microtransit and alternatives. I would like to say that the study is going to be something that it would be great to have that information, but if we come back to that information and it's $1 million in terms of investment on the city of Portsmouth, I don't know if that is there at the moment. And so I guess I'm frustrated a little bit with the characterization of that we're not doing anything when we have a climate action plan. We've taken, I was looking in terms of, education around thermal or installations, and just peeking through it again. There's a lot of things that are less costly than something that, and are actually doing the things in the climate action plan than a study on the things that we have just approved a garage or to be included as a part of that. So I would say, like, taking the money we just appropriated to the garage in terms of the study and the design and the plan, if we could incorporate, all alternatives to that as a part of that study, that might be a way to kind of thread that needle and have both served. But to have a separate study outside of the parking garage study seems like a lot of money when we know that it's $1 million plus for microtransit to come in. Councilor Bagley, look.
I do take a little exception that we haven't done anything. I mean, I spent a lot of time with the largest microtransit company in the world, Via, and we had them prepare a long slide deck on opportunities for microtransit in Portsmouth, not just at one level, but in 3 different configurations. One where they provided the software and the app, and one where they provided the software and the app in the back end, one where they supplied the vehicles, the drivers, the whole enchilada, and they gave us price points of what this would cost. So to say that we've done nothing in 4 years, I think is insulting to those of us that spent a great deal of time on this study with the largest microtransit company in the world, specific to Portsmouth.
I don't know who you're directing that to, Councilor Bagley, but appreciate the energy and enthusiasm that you're doing. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. Councilor Bagley, I didn't mean to offend you or anyone else and to demean your work in any way possible. What I'm saying is this is what the Climate Action Plan called for, and this is what the Sustainability Committee has asked for, is this element sheet. And that's what they came forward with and asked for out of the Climate Action Plan, and we need to fund it if that's what they're asking for, because they're asking for implementation of the Climate Action Plan. And so there's nothing wrong with doing a study on microtransit, but that's not actually what this element sheet is asking for. It's asking for study of alternative transportation options in the community, and we need to be able to support the Climate Action Plan that we adopted as a city council and what the Sustainability Committee has identified as their priorities.
Councilor Den, one second. I think like the frustration. I mean, I understand and looking at what am I trying to call these things? These pages.
Element sheets.
Element sheets. That's right. The element sheet. There was a lot of study, or there was a lot of. It could be confusing because many that spoke were speaking on microtransit as a way to, as I recall, the public comment, as a way to lessen our need for a parking garage, and to look at all alternatives for that. What I think the council has spoken on, at least this evening, is that we are going to move forward and fund a parking garage, and the study of that to the tune of 10% of total project costs, not including the land acquisition. And where it would be helpful, I think, to align these priorities so that we don't have a situation where we have PTS going through and creating a large effort underway for microtransit, only for us to get the price point and recognize that in order to fund that would mean not funding Coast in the same amount, that we incorporate alternatives as we plan out the parking garage as ways to maximize the impact that a parking garage may have for us, whether that's the element sheet of charging for e-bikes and things like that as a part of that. But it's hard to turn something, I guess, into a general fund study, what we're looking for federal funds, in a time when we are saying that federal funds are going to be less likely to be here, and that means that they're going to be less likely for Coast, and there might be a requirement to spend more money on Coast than we otherwise would have in this upcoming year, to then look at a study and point to that and say that's something that we could have allocated to this amount, or to this goal. I think.
Your Honor, I have an idea, something to think about. Given that this could be construed as a transportation activity, would there be a desire to include this $100,000 in the element sheet about the new parking garage? And intertwine the two, parking garage
Combine them into
related
one.
to other alternatives that could support both different alternatives for transit and the parking garage itself, to better understand the size and scope of the garage.
Would that require us to vote again on the?
You could amend that BI 26 PW 54, or you could use from the 3.15 approved.
So you mean just move the 100,000 from
you're gonna add 100,000, rather than add it to the general fund, add it to parking and literally park it in that element sheet, rather
Would we
than
have to increase the amount of, could we just include it as a requirement
as
of
part of
the
that 3.15?
3.1? Because again, the 100,000, we don't have, I guess, before the, and then this task force could be as a part of informing the design build process of the parking garage.
So, to clarify, we'd be taking the project description here for the feasibility study and moving that, adding it to the parking garage, $3.1 million that we already voted on.
3.15.
3.15. Yeah, I have no objection to that.
Councilor Tabor?
I think, could we emphasize that what we're combining into the 3 million includes all of the recommendations from the Sustainability Committee that we have here?
Don't see why not. It would be inclusive of any parking garage that we're going to get built. It's probably going to be the most sustainable parking garage, in the history of mankind. So, I think it recognizes, again, and I think it speaks to the idea that we are trying to deliver something of tangible value. I am, concerned if we have a study on its own that is not a part of what we're actually doing with the parking garage, that it's not going to end up having an impact on what will be something that is generating revenue for the city. So if we can include that as a part, if it's, it seems like we'd marry together where you'd have loops, potentially emanating out of the parking garage and things of that nature, or between parking garage. Yep.
Quick question, just process sake. They're both BI 26s, but one's PW and one's PL. Does that make it both PW and PL? If you combine it into PW 54? I just, because planning and sustainability was part of one, and I just wanted to make sure that we didn't lose the department that actually was behind it.
I think it would be clearer, well, I don't know that it matters, and I would look to the staff, but PW connotes it's coming out of parking versus planning. And it comes from it is funded through parking funds versus general fund.
Okay.
Councilor Bagley?
Thanks, Your Honor, and I would be happy to support that. My only concern is I think there was talk earlier of a task force, and I think that's needed. There's definitely a disconnect between the work that's being done in different areas of the city and with different committees, and somewhere we need to coalesce all of that together, and maybe under the auspices of a parking garage / transportation center. That makes sense, but I don't want to lose sight of getting the valuable input of people like, the executive director of Coast and Mr. Lyons and others who have a lot of expertise in this area. But unless we bring them all together and bring all the data all together, I think there's too many disconnects right now.
Would agree. I don't know if we need to solve that. I think that this conversation has eliminated that, and I think that if we have a conversation, if we make it and mark it in terms of the element sheet, include that the sustainability's recommendations for alternative transportation be a part of the parking garage. One, we're gonna it's not just supporting our climate action plan. Two, it's extending the money that we're spending on the parking garage to make it serve more people in a better way, which should be the goal of anything that we're doing, and that we can align those seems like not a compromise, but a synergy of those two efforts and the climate action plan. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. While I'm not excited about moving the description to the parking garage, because I think transit in and of itself is a priority and is more of a priority, frankly, than parking garages. And we have 2 parking garages already, so we could have a shuttle loop now without even building a new parking garage. I would go along with it if it truly will guarantee that funding does address having, looking at a shuttle loop, looking at a hybrid approach, all the things that are described in this element sheet. Far too often, though, we combine things like this and that gets lost. So I just want to make sure that the alternative transportation piece does not get lost in the planning around the parking garage, and the parking garage takes primacy over looking at alternative transportation options.
And I'll just add to that, although looks like they'll be combined, that the parking garage doesn't have to be completed for anything that comes from this to actually be implemented. So if it turns out something's going to be implemented before ground's even broke on a parking garage, that's great. And as far as the task force goes, I'll leave that to the incoming council and the mayor to appoint.
It can be any citizen, Josh.
Could even be you.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Is there,
So I'll withdraw my initial motion.
And do you want me to make the motion?
Please.
I'll make the motion to combine the project description with the fund of BI 26PL29 with all its components of notes and requests with BI 26PW54 funding and element page.
Second.
If I could offer a friendly amendment, Your Honor, that we rename PW 54 parking garage and public transportation.
Sure. I accept that.
Second accepts.
Councilor Bagley?
Did we want to change the amount, or we're leaving the amount the
Same amount.
Okay.
It's 3.15.
Because I think the design is going to be incorporative of public transportation as well as parking.
And could speak to the size of the garage and the need, if we're able to have alternatives as well.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Oh,
Oh,
don't
roll
we do
call.
roll call?
Oh,
No,
roll call.
Joe's gone. Joe's gone.
Oh, no, yeah,
Oh,
because
she's
Joe's,
gone?
yeah, so she had to step away. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Your Honor, I have one last motion, which will be quick. I motion to add $50,000 of general funds to the CIP for FY '28 and FY '31 for greenhouse gas inventories to be completed by contracted professionals.
Second.
All right, so we have 15 years as a city to actually meet our goal of achieving net zero energy by 2040 as laid out in our climate action plan. Our past inventories have been done. They were well-intended. However, the most recent one was done by a volunteer. That was about 4 or 5 years ago. The one before that was done by a UNH intern who didn't actually get the data up until, I think, the final week of his time with the city. And federal funding may not be available now, but when federal funding does become available for projects in the climate action plan, they'll likely require a greenhouse gas inventory. Now, for the past couple discussions on the CIP, I've been saying how I want to include it for this fiscal year. However, talking with the Planning Sustainability Director, there already is a UNH fellow ready to this summer to do a greenhouse gas inventory. And the thought here is, if that doesn't happen like in the past, several ones, is to have this in a future year to go ahead with the initial thought they had to just put out an RFP to have a firm come in and do one. But my goal and my hope is that that might not be, if the UNH fellow is able to complete one and has a software that he needs, then this may not be necessary.
Councilor Denton? Councilor Moreau?
So this is an add of an element sheet that doesn't exist, correct?
Correct, that I've been speaking to for the past several meetings. It's just not for FY '27, it's FY '28 and then FY '31 to actually have a regular rhythm of these.
Excuse me, Counselor, the agenda says 30. Do you mean 30 or 31?
I was gonna go with 31, but I'll go with 30.
Councilor Bagley?
I'm happy to support this because it's a new element, and it gives everybody a year to talk about it before we actually put dollars to it, which I think is the ideal way to introduce new elements.
I would agree, and I appreciate, the same discussion that we had with no federal funding available at the moment. This takes that into account and prepares us for a time which, potentially there might be federal funding available in the future, and to be ready up until that point to have the study done, ready for any potential. So, supportive. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And now we vote on the full motion.
I believe that as amended, do we have Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I had two more items. They're not amendments per se, but they're requests to update element sheets. We have several schools' element sheets, BI 07, SE 15, school facilities, capital improvements. We also have the elementary school upgrades and the renovation of the Portsmouth Career and Technical Education Center. And none of these have policy compliance check marks. I think it's important to note that 2 of them trigger percent for art, and they all trigger the green buildings policy. So I just want to make sure that we update the element sheets to reflect those policies. I realize that doesn't impact the budget at all, so that's why I'm pointing it out now and why we don't need an amendment.
Yep, got it.
And the other thing I just wanted to do is I wanted to thank the city for including the element sheet. It's VE 27PL08, electrification of city fleet. This is something that I've been asking for a very long time, and I truly appreciate the funds being provided for this element at this time.
And while we're on the topic of correcting the CIP, is it possible, do we need to amend the CIP to have the numbers, or would those be accurately reflected in terms of the columns that were misrepresented for years 28 and 29? Does that require an amendment, or is that a?
Those edits will be incorporated into the document that goes to the council as part of the budget.
Okay. Any other discussion? We'll wait a motion to pass the CIP
We
as amended.
already have that motion on the
Do you have the motion on the
Yes.
table? All right. We will have a roll call vote.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi?
Yes.
Mayor McCackron?
Yes.
Your
All right.
Honor, before we leave this topic, can I bring something up?
Sure.
There's someone in the audience who's done this 30 years in a row. His name is Andrew Pergel. This is the last time he will be in front of the council as an employee of the city. It is his last CIP. You just need to spend one moment, against his wishes, I'm sure, to say thank you for being an incredible teacher and leader, for being focused, for being insightful, for always caring about your staff and for the city. And in my 6 years as city manager, there is no one who has done more to directly and positively impact this city's financial stability, health, and success more than you, Andrew. So thank you.
I would like to now invite Andrew up for his prepared remarks. If you would like to say anything, Andrew, we would love to hear it. He's good. But Andrew is, I can't top what the city manager has said, but in many number of tough conversations and topics, Andrew has always had a very calming demeanor when discussing some things that are sometimes a little less than calm. You will certainly be missed, and I can't really imagine the budget work sessions without you. So, on behalf of the council and the 23,000 people that you've served with distinction for 30 years, we appreciate everything that you've done. So with that, we will take a 5-minute recess and come back. Thank you. Welcome back to the city council meeting. We're going to take an item out of order, and I'd wait a motion to suspend the rules to bring up Councilor Lombardi's item number 1.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to sunset the mayor's Blue Ribbon Task Force to study the establishment of a public-private partnership to properly archive historical documents relating to the city of Portsmouth.
Second.
We're doing this because we have accomplished the purpose of that committee. We have formed a new entity that is a collaboration between the Portsmouth Athenaeum, the Historical Society, Strawberry Bank Museum, and the City of Portsmouth to archive documents and realia into a common facility. That's it.
That's it. Well, not an easy feat, Councilor Lombardi.
Yeah.
So impressive that not only the vision was there, but the ability to pull all of those groups and see a shared opportunity to work together, including the city. So I look forward to what may come of the nonprofit to focus on that and what it means to the city. But appreciate you shepherding this and getting to this point where you can sunset this committee.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a motion.
Yeah. I was just seeing if anybody wanted to say nice things about you. Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Mayor.
That's right. It is near 10, and you're about to leave.
I'll be really quick. But I want to thank Councilor Lombardi and the whole task force for their work, and for, Emma Stratton, the Portsmouth Historical Society, the Strawberry Bank, Portsmouth Athenaeum. It takes teamwork to make a dream work, and I just thank you for your hard work and for your accomplishments.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Councilor Lombardi. And we're back to page 2. This is going to go fast now, so super fast. All right, so we have the public hearing on, the public hearing and second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Administrative Code, Article 4, Commissions and Authorities, Section 1.414, establishing a permanent energy advisory committee.
Your Honor, I have moved to pass second reading and hold third and final reading at the December 22nd City Council meeting.
Second.
The Energy Advisory Committee has been in existence for 5 years, and during that time, it spearheaded the adoption of Portsmouth Community Power, and then on this latest term, we reformulated goals, and we researched and recommended a municipal solar array on Jones Avenue, and that we've all voted on that. We had a very encouraging report about the feasibility of that last Wednesday. We've had workshops on solar, home solar panels, and how to button up your home for greater insulation. We've taken advantage of some of the Biden-era Inflation Reduction Act programs, got a no-cost evaluation of green energy sources for the sewer plants from the National Renewable Energy Lab. We developed some really comprehensive data on the cost-benefit of solar power out at Pease. And looking ahead, the community and the committee and staff will have a March report on Jones Avenue solar array options, and lots to deliberate on there. Leveraging a community power, which is going to be a growing player in the state's electric markets. And as Councilor Cook and others have pointed out, the committee benefits from some really strong technical backgrounds of its members. Tom Rooney's an expert in energy efficiency and microgrids. Kevin Shred and Ben D'Antonio have very deep utility company experience. Peter Somsich was a state rep and served on the Energy and Technology Committee. Betsy Blaisdell and Tracy Cameron. Both work nationally on green energy solutions, and they're experts in their field. So with support from the council, this committee, if made permanent, gives us the expertise to anticipate some of the really dramatic changes that are happening right now in the energy and utility markets. And as the expression goes, skate to where the puck is going to help benefit and protect our residents.
And Councilor Tabor? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to take a moment to thank Councilor Tabor for his leadership on this Blue Ribbon Committee that is now going to hopefully become permanent with the council's vote. This work has been instrumental in making huge changes in the way that we look at energy and energy policy here in the city, and I look forward to the continued work of this committee. It's been an honor to serve with Councilor Tabor on the committee. I had my last meeting with the committee last week, and I was able to thank them. They are all very impressive professionals, and they bring an incredible amount of expertise to the committee, to the city. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Blaylock?
Thank you, Honor. Yeah, and I just want to thank Councilor Tabor and the Energy Advisory Committee. I think this is something that will be continuing to be a challenge for the city of Portsmouth. I'm always a little weary of how many committees we have, but I think this is an important one. I know, energy, whether it be electricity, renewable or not, that's going to be a challenge for the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor, and to Councilor Cook for spearheading this committee for as long as you've done, and appreciate Councilor Tabor not giving up the ghost yet and sticking around on that. But Councilor Cook, a lot of great work that went into not only community power but everything, in terms of solar arrays. Being able to focus on this and the continued inclusion of those from the utility sector, especially as it talks to transmission, which if you look at your electrical bill makes up such a large portion of that. Solar can have a huge impact if it doesn't have to leave your house to be able to deliver those types of cost savings. So appreciate that you guys have focused on not only helping us make the right decision but make the economic decision, and how that has been woven through everything that you've done. So appreciate the work that will continue, and for standing this up, especially with community power being a big part of what we do as a city. All in favor?
Public hearing.
Oh, there's a public hearing. My God. All right. We will now open the public hearing. Speak to, for, or against all the great things we said about Councilor Cook and Tabor and the establishment of this committee. Seeing no one rise and no one on Zoom, I am closing the public hearing. Any additional council questions or deliberations?
I just add, Your Honor, that I did ask if anyone on the committee wanted to step back last Wednesday. I haven't heard. So the complement is as it is right now, and we have one applicant for the position Herb Lloyd vacated.
Excellent. Now, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Your Honor, I'd suspend the rules, make a motion to suspend the rules to bring forward for third and final reading.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Make a motion that the final reading be tonight.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you again. Now, we have third and final reading of ordinances, and I know you're looking, if you're watching at home, you see a lot, but it's the first one, and then all of them through. So the third and final reading of ordinance amending Chapter 6, licenses. Article 1, general provisions, by amending the title of Chapter 6 to licenses and encumbrances, and replacing Article 1 in its entirety with Article 1, encumbrance permits and licenses for the use of public property, sections 6.101 through 6.110.
Your Honor, I move to pass third and final reading of the ordinance as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? I know a lot of work went into this, and appreciate the sausage making that we had at the last council meeting. I appreciate the willingness to make these amendments and to have time to digest them. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, third and final reading of ordinance amending Chapter 6, licenses, Article 10, theatricals, parades, open-air meetings, Section 6.1001, license required, Section 6.1002, license form, Section 6.1003, fee, Section 6.1004, penalty for failure to license be deleted in its entirety.
Your Honor, I move to pass third and final reading of the ordinance as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, third and final reading of ordinance amending Chapter 7, vehicles, traffic, and parking, Article 1, parking meters, Section 7.114, construction permit be deleted in its entirety.
Your Honor, I move to pass third and final reading.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, third and final reading of ordinance amending Chapter 8, encumbrances and injurious practices in streets, Article 1, encumbrances, Section 8.101, encumbrances, general section 8.105, digging up a street, Section 8.106, license to obstruct street, Section 8.114, awnings and signs, Section 8.120, displaying merchandise on sidewalk be deleted in its entirety.
Your Honor, I move to pass the third reading and final reading.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, third and final reading of ordinance amending Chapter 9, Article 5, public way obstructions, placement and registration, Sections 9.501 through 9.511 regarding public way obstructions be deleted in its entirety.
Move to pass third and final reading of the ordinance as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And finally, third and final reading of ordinance amending Chapter 11, sidewalks, sewers, layout of streets, subdivisions of land, Article 6, referrals to Planning Board, Section 11.602A1, referral and report be amended to delete the word.
Your Honor, I move to pass third and final reading of the ordinance as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So if you had just tuned in to the City Council, we had a long conversation last week about how we're going to get rid of some ordinances and change those, and then this is the resulting a lot of them. And so there's a couple more that are going to come with the city manager, and now we're on to her section.
Thank you, Your Honor. First is a request for rescission of City Council Policy 2009-03, the projecting sign policy. This should be rescinded because we just adopted new ordinance language.
I move to rescind City Council Policy 2009-03.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Similarly, looking to seek the rescission of City Council Policy 2010-01 regarding flags projecting over city property.
Your Honor, I move to rescind City Council Policy 2010-01.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Item number 3 is a request for a water sewer rate model study work session. You will recall at our last council meeting on November 17th, my colleagues Peter and Al and Eric presented on the state of and the status of where our rate model has taken us, and we'd like to engage in a deeper dive and hear from both the council and the public, and as such, we're looking to combine that work session along with the budget preview to be held on Wednesday, January 14th.
Your Honor, I move to schedule a work session regarding the water sewer rate model study on January 14th at the previously scheduled time of 6 p.m.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Gentlemen, thanks for sticking around. Item number 4 is a request for a 1-year extension to the current usage and maintenance agreement for the use of the parking lot in conjunction with St. John's Masonic Lodge. We have had several previously approved extensions to our agreement. We'd like one more 1-year agreement so that we have time to digest and study which of the many recommendations came out of our parking utilization study, which may help the city in general and specifically in this area. And we would like that time, and the lodge has been gracious to work with us, and we are thrilled to be able to preserve our working relationship with the lodge.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to negotiate and enter into a parking lot usage maintenance agreement with St. John's in the form similar to the attached.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. The last item under my name is a request for a pilot payment for the Friends of Lafayette House. This is similar to an item we had at our last meeting relative to Betty's Dream. These funds in the amount of $3,500, which is a similar amount to previous years, will be used to address non-utility municipal services provided by the city to the Friends of Lafayette House.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to enter into a pilot agreement with the Friends of Lafayette House in the amount of $3,500 for
In favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Next, we have the consent agenda.
Your Honor, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second?
Any discussion? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to point out that under the consent agenda, item B, there's a request to hold a 5K walk and run on Sunday, September 27th, in a very busy area of town. The only reason I'm noting that is that the time frame for this walk and run will conflict with several events that occur that weekend. That weekend just seems to be one of our busiest weekends of the year. And so I'm just pointing that out because I'm sure the city manager's office can handle it, but I'm concerned about that impacting parking and challenges.
Would that be something that could be taken under the city managers with authority to act?
It would, yeah, and we are cognizant of working this event in safely with the other events.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, email correspondence.
Your Honor, I move to accept and place on file.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And now, an installation, well, first, would wait a motion to go past 10:30.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
Your
opposed?
Honor, I would just like to say that I'm leaving now. I have a very early appointment tomorrow morning, so.
Thank you, Councilor Lombardi. Safe travels. We now have the installation of marker in Prescott Park.
Your Honor, I move to the city manager to negotiate the terms and conditions of a license for the acceptance and placement of a historic marker.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. When I looked through the materials about this marker, I was really kind of unclear where exactly the request is as far as placement goes and how that works with the plans for Prescott Park in the upcoming years. So, is there any insight into where they're requesting the marker to go?
If we suspend the rules, we can have, and just,
Motion to suspend the rules.
Second?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Your Honor and Council Member. I'm Curtis Herman with the Sons of the American Revolution that put the packet together. Our proposal is to work with Prescott Park. We don't have a preconceived location for that, other than the conceptual drawings or whatever the artificial intelligence picked out. But those were just conceptual drawings, but we have not picked a spot, and we would want to work with Prescott Park to make sure that we're congruent with the rest of the markers in both style and location.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for sticking it around there. Next, we have on to the council agenda. First, acceptance of resignations. Max Ward from the Sustainability Committee.
Your Honor, I move to accept with regret the resignation of Max Ward from the Sustainability Committee.
Second?
Any discussion? Max, we appreciate the service that you've brought to the city and for making Portsmouth just a little bit better. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, Phyllis Eldridge from the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Your Honor, I move to accept with regret the resignation of Phyllis Eldridge from the Zoning Board of Adjustment effective January 1, 2026.
Second?
Any discussion?
Thank you, Phyllis.
Phyllis has done it all.
Many years.
Many years. And, you know, the reason of stepping down is a good one, but we will miss you, Phyllis, in that. And if you want to come back and serve on, I think it's Concom is the only land use board that she's not been on, then you're more than welcome to. We certainly appreciate the numbers of years of service you've given to the city, and we are certainly richer for it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, you will find 2 applications in the packet to review. Please reach out both or either to me or to the applicants directly. First, Robert P. Sullivan as a regular member to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and the appointment of Mike Lucas as an alternate member to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Appreciate both of those applications, and I expect them to be fantastic members. We have some appointments to be voted upon. The appointment of Jim Wilson to the Cable and Broadband Internet Commission, appointment of Wendy Cotreau Clement to the Economic Development Commission, appointment of Daniel Finnan to the Safe Water Advisory Group, and the reappointment of Thomas Nees to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Your Honor, I would move to appoint James Wilson to the Cable Broadband Internet Commission, Wendy Corto Clement to the Economic Development Commission, Daniel Finnan to the Safe Water Advisory Group, and reappoint Tom Neese to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Second.
Any discussion? Thank you again for your willingness to serve Portsmouth. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The assistant mayor had to leave the Zoom, so we will come back with her end-of-year report on the African burial ground at the next city council meeting. And now we're on to Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. My first motion of the evening has to do with adding Muslim holy days to the city calendar. As everyone is aware, we have several Christian holy days and we have Jewish holy days as well. It's really an effort to avoid scheduling meetings when somebody is celebrating a major religious holiday. So I would move to add the Muslim holy days of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha to the city calendar, including not scheduling meetings the night before Eid al-Fitr during the breaking of the Ramadan fast.
Second.
Happy to answer any questions.
I just want to add that what we would do if this were to pass is in March, the planning board would meet on the 4th Thursday of the month, and we could move the budget review that was scheduled for Wednesday, May 27th to the following night, Thursday, May 28th.
Councilor Cook. Thank you, City Manager.
And I wanted just to note for everyone, these holidays move. So they're much like Jewish high holy days that are not always scheduled the same every year. So, and they aren't always scheduled immediately at the beginning of the year either. So this is one of those things that we'll have to check in with the local imam on scheduling and making sure that we're avoiding these days.
As a result of this packet, had a member of the community reach out and ask if this would be applicable to the school. It would not be, but a similar request could be made of the school board and as part of union contracts and negotiations, possibly be incorporated in that. But appreciate Councilor Cook for bringing this forward.
Your Honor, I just have practical concerns with all our boards and committees. 70 is the number I've been given. With all our who are all volunteers, I just am concerned that as we add holidays like this, we lose the ability to count on a regular day each month that a committee can meet. So I think it's a bit of a hardship to be shifting meeting dates and times around as we add religious holidays, and I think that has to be balanced in the decision. And that goes for the public too. You know, they need to be able to count on the planning board being on Thursday, particular Thursday of the month. So I have concerns about this and wouldn't support it, particularly Eid al-Adha's ability to shift on short notice, sometimes 10 days in advance, sometimes less. I think that might run into the problem of moving dates too close to our public notice that we have to give.
Councilor Cook or Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor. I think Councilor Tabor makes good points, but that's the reason I'll be supporting it. I grew up in a community with a larger than typical Jewish population, so we had the High Holy Days off from elementary school, and I learned a lot about a religion that I wasn't part of. I think the city acknowledging minority religions gives everybody a chance to acknowledge that we don't all have the same history and traditions, even though we all live in the same town. And I think with that knowledge, we all come closer together.
Appreciate that, Councilor Bagley, and Councilor Tabor's point. I would say to Councilor Blaylock's earlier point of having too many boards and commissions, we'll do our best to reduce those next year. I think that there could be, I think the city manager made a note of that I put that on the record. But I think that there would be a, if we might want to make some, as we add now, I guess the three major religions of planet Earth on here, make some accommodations for chances that they might not be able to move, and make our best efforts towards that. Now that we have all religions incorporated, as we make council policies next year, I think that's something that we could bring under advisement, so that if there are things, obviously balancing somebody's desire to get a building permit with desire of somebody might not being able to come to that meeting or make that choice is something that we could certainly take. Now, I think that's easier that we have all major religions covered. But Councilor Morrow.
I just would like to point out that the planning board actually has 2 days that are reserved for planning board meetings a month, so it's not just the 3rd week, but the 4th week as well. So, right, so it should be planned out in most applicants' mind, knowing that there is actually 2 meetings. In case we have too many applications, it would automatically, some of the agenda would get pushed off to the next week. So it shouldn't be that big of an imposition, is my point.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. The reason I'm bringing this forward now is that I feel like this was just kind of an oversight when the mosque was moved to Portsmouth and founded in Portsmouth. We just didn't take this step yet, and now that we have an active mosque in the city and several Muslim neighbors, I think it's important that we move forward in recognizing not all of their holidays. We're recognizing 2 really key dates and 1 night before. So we're missing the majority of their holidays, but we're missing the really high holy day, the really holy days that people want to celebrate with their families rather than being at a zoning board meeting or a city council meeting. I don't want anyone to be negatively impacted and feel like they have to miss a family event because they need to attend a city meeting.
Certainly. I think that this is something that can certainly be held for the council, and we will incorporate that. Again, I do think that there might be some flexibility that we can offer now that we have all religions, or all major religions covered, that we can incorporate this into the other volunteer committees that have to schedule this meeting room as well. But with that, I would ask that we take that up at next year's as we create policies for the council. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye. Opposed.
Okay. We're down to what? 7. So 6-1.
My next item is the request for the work session that I mentioned during our discussion on the CIP budget. I would move to request a work session with the school board on school buildings and grounds improvements that should be included in the CIP budget in out years. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Certainly.
Oh, second.
You have a second, I think, either Councilor Bagley or
Councilor Bagley
Taylor.
seconded it.
Yeah.
The reason, as I mentioned in our discussion of the CIP, that I'm bringing this forward is we've had a few large surprises in the last few years of items that we didn't anticipate in the CIP budget. And I think it's really important that we have a really adequate planning for the future. There are real challenges when we have a project come forward, like the New Franklin School project, which is $10 million, and it's suddenly in the CIP budget this year and next, and that impacts some of our other larger projects. As one of the co-chairs of the Municipal Buildings Committee, I immediately looked at that and said, uh-oh, how does this impact the planning that we're doing for municipal buildings, because everything that we put in the CAP budget does impact other things in the budget. So I want to make sure we meet with the school board, that we know exactly what they see as forecast items coming forward in the next 5 years, so that we can make sure those are in the CAP budget, and then we hear from them on what their priorities are, so that we can address those adequately and we don't have any more unexpected major expenses coming forward.
Thank you, Councilor Cook. Is there a date on this?
No, I'm going to let the city manager
Okay.
determine what's the best date for us to do that. Clearly, it's not urgent. We've
Yep.
just passed the CIP budget, but I think it's just important that we have this discussion.
It'd be helpful during the budget process itself. Any other comments or questions? I think that this could serve a great purpose in that I think that when we put together school budgets, there's always a pressure, as they are the half of the equation that accounts for a lot. We end up having buildings potentially take a backseat on those because of what I know that there's concern about having too much control of the city. They are city-owned buildings, but they're operated by the school. But it would, I think, be able to bring forward some investment that would create a situation that we were able to do more maintenance than replacement when we come to some of these things. So certainly supportive. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Councilor Denton, we've already gotten through those.
Correct.
Councilor Bagley.
This is a long one. Thank you, Your Honor.
This is a long one.
I move to request a report back on all private parking spaces, contracts for all city-owned parking or reasonably presumed city-owned spaces in the Worth lot and adjacent surface lot street area, including holders' names, locations, term expiration, and options to return these spaces to public use. Request that this list be published annually on the city website in a prominent location as long as such contracts are in force. If I got a second, I'll speak.
Second.
This is those lots that are reserved, I think, from 8 to 8 or 7 to 7. And if you park there, you get towed. But most people think they're city-owned. Whenever the city does maintenance on the lot, we have to shuffle these all around, which the last couple of years has caused quite a bit of confusion. I don't know all the history. A couple residents have kind of sent me some documents from the 70s and shed some light on some of these agreements. Some of them are much more recent with the creation of Jimmy's. But I do think it would serve the public interest if these were normal city spaces and not reserved for the use of condominium owners. And I think the only way that's ever going to happen is if we aim to do that at some point.
So is the question for a report back on what, okay, so the question is a report back on what parking spots are in contracts are in effect, and then to annually publish those as a recurring report back. Is that something that we can ask for as a, I don't see why not, but I don't know if we would continue. Maybe we just put on, things never leave the website anyway, so that's easy enough, probably, I think. And is there, yeah, it's just going on the website. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Approval of grants and donations. Approval of a Homeland Security Grant Award to purchase ballistic helmets for the Seacoast Emergency Response Team in the amount of $27,383.
Move to approve and accept the grants as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, approval of grant agreement between the Granite United Way and the City of Portsmouth for the Opioid Abatement Community Grant Award in the amount of $11,388.
Mayor, move to approve and accept the grant as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, the approval of Moose License Plate Conservation Grant in the amount of $9,929.95.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the grant as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
We're getting close to that $10,000 mark.
I know, that's the most that we can get, guys. We still need to get some more people
No,
getting.
that's not the way it works.
It's not the way it works?
No.
Based on quotes.
The grant is for whatever we actually propose to spend it on. We just can't spend more than $10,000. each year.
Okay, so
It's
we
not
gotta
based off of how many people have
Oh.
those big
It's
things.
directly tied to the scope of work and the bid.
Yes.
I thought this entire time.
I know, I needed to correct you for a while.
I'm excited over here. 'cause
Okay,
get a
so
little
we
closer.
could have, all right, so we could have, so
not
that's
that
why it always comes just a hair
right.
shy of 10,000. All right, well, today I learned. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Finally, we are on the city manager's informational items.
I will be brief, Your Honor. The first item is a report back as requested by the council on the topic of green burials. Between the time of the request and the date of tonight's meeting, a group of staff members and I met with John and Sky Maher, as well as Lee Webster from the New Hampshire Funeral Resources and Education. Kim McNamara has really taken a lead role in this as well, so happy to answer questions on a going forward basis, but we thought it would be helpful to give not only a background on what we understand green burials to constitute, but also the status of available cemeteries in the city. Number 2 is a report back on the resident access parking program. It is really late. What I will say is that Carl Weber and Ben Fletcher and Peter Rice have worked very hard to propose in your packet a draft summary of a proposed one-year pilot program, along with a draft policy. And similar to what we've brought to you before, was we brought you a plan or a consideration. We're leaving it to you and to the public to ruminate over it. We will come back on December 22nd to ask for adoption of the policy. And then in early 2026, we will roll out the ordinance changes necessary to effectuate a March 1 start date. I see a hand, so I'll stop.
Councilor?
No, I love the framework and the policy and what you've done. Because you're going all the way up Hanover Street to Brewster and you're only including in Pearl Street, I'd just like us to consider including Rock Street, which would be the next most busily parked on that leads between Islington and Hanover. So I just asked for that consideration.
That could be an amendment when we bring it up for adoption. That'd be great. And I want to make the point tonight for people who are listening that all it takes is for your car to be registered with the city of Portsmouth. That's it. That is how you make it into this program. So
That was my second question.
it'll be very exciting.
Councilor Bagley, was that a question or just a?
Just excitement.
Well, I have another question about that. So does that include the Park Mobile app aspect as being a
It is
resident?
separate and apart from. So if you never use, if you're Rich Blaylock's grandfather and you never have Park Mobile on your phone,
They'll never
as
do
long as your car is registered with the city of Portsmouth, you will be what we call whitelisted.
Right,
when the
but you don't
parking-
get the discount when you're actually using the Park Mobile app for being a resident.
But
That's
these,
separate.
but these would be in areas where you're not being charged.
Oh, I understand. It's just this question has come up in my household, and I want to make
Not
sure I
Park
get the
Mobile,
right answer.
Completely separate. You will also notice in the packet, we included a financial analysis of costs associated with the effort. So we look forward to rolling out the pilot in early 2026 with your indulgence. Okay, Pease Development Authority Board meeting update from November 18th. The golf course is closed. Well, there's snow on it now. For the 4th year in a row, they've had over 70,000 rounds of golf. Their indoor golf simulators are in full swing. Breeze Airlines started flying to Raleigh-Durham, home of the Duke University Blue Devils. Started last week. Richard Hartley started formally as the director of the Division of Ports and Harbors. And of note to commercial boaters, Friday, December 19th is permit day at the Dover DMV. Apparently that is a big deal, and you can go from 9 to noon. That is, the last thing is American Cruise Lines is looking into a multi-year contract negotiations with the port because they did so well. The last item under my name, under informational items, would be an update on the tax bill status. Nathan and the team have sent all the material that the state has required. We are now waiting on the state to contact us to set the tax rate. The state has exactly 3 people working on this entire effort for the entire state and all of its communities. Nathan does expect to have a conversation this week, which will then set in motion the process by which we prepare and send out the tax bills. So for those of you at home, you don't have a tax bill yet. Please don't worry. Once it is out, we will send a press release and we will include the precise dates, and you have 30 days to pay the tax bill. Thank you.
City manager, anything under miscellaneous? I want to just publicly thank DPW, Police and Fire for all the work on the holiday parade. It was great. Even the Pease Development Authority, both in the port and that gigantic airport. Wow.
I wasn't sure it's going to fit down the street.
I'm happy that, Congress were ripping it up after that thing, but that was huge. So just appreciate all the work that went into that It was great.
Thank you.
Wait, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.